Elvis, morning, Elvis.
Morning. How you doing?
Yeah, good. Always Friday's always a good day.
Yes.
And we've got some interesting subject matter today, actually. So our focus, our question of the day to you is on this new Nyaope drug craze called Bluetooth, which is fast gaining popularity in some townships. Now, one addict gets high on one dosage, Elvis, and what happens next is a little bit crazy, isn't it?
Very crazy, because they take a syringe, draw the blood from the one that's high, and then share it with 3 or 4 others. Can you believe?
I can't seem to get my head around it, but that's where we are right now. So the question is on screen. Is Nyaope, and we're talking about specifically this Bluetooth thing, is it getting out of control in our communities right now? Send us what you think. We'd love to hear what you're tweeting us. Of course, you guys have been tweeting us already just before we start the show. Lechasa is with us, Elvis.
He says this Nyaope issue is now on a degree level, and it's getting worse on a daily basis. It's destroying community members. Some of the SAPS sell it.
Degree level. I like it. It must have been on diploma level before. Mural says it's even worse with a Bluetooth scandal. Yes, you can now get it via Bluetooth, they say, this Nyaope. It's incredible.
Victor says it's obvious how the drug is escalating. It's the one prospering drug which keeps on getting stronger daily. So says Victor's running.
Yeah, we never used to have this kind of thing, but now it's gaining in popularity. It's crazy. Keep tweeting us. We'd love to hear what you think. We're not going to talk much about it. We just want to hear what you guys think about this today. We've got a whole host of other stories that we're going to look at, but we're also running a poll. And of course, this week we've seen people complaining of going to 14, 15 job interviews and not getting hired because they believe that they're too ugly. That's why they're not being hired. Elvis?
Well, that's exactly the thing, Evan, because I went to an ugly competition and they said to me they don't want any professionals. So in this case, we're asking you, should your looks count during a job interview? Well, 27% are saying yes, 47% are saying no, and 26% are saying sometimes. There's 124 votes in. You've got 23 hours left to vote. But what do you think about this scandal? I mean, it's a shocking story, isn't it?
Yeah, now before we get to Lechasa's tweet, I think absolutely. I think we need to figure out the PC and the reality as well. Yeah. The reality is, like, people want somebody who looks good, you know? And I think you need to try at least shave or put on something. Having said that, I would not be able to get a job as a CG animator dressed like this. So pretend you care for who you're speaking to.
There you go.
There we go. But Lechasa's got a point here. And nice to have you back, Lechasa. You know, you've been away for a little bit. I think he was traveling or something. He says, I've already been attended several interviews, but with no luck, I wasn't hired. Obviously, it's because of my ugly face. Lechasa, we missed you, my friend. Keep tweeting us.
Nhlanzeko says, whoever says yes, that one, he or she is delusional. There you go.
Yeah, this one from Hlengiweka Skafana says, Newsroom, according to my side, I said no, it does not count at all. But, you know, the world doesn't quite work like that. The world loves beautiful people. What do you think? Tell us what you think of it. Go vote on our poll and also tweet us on that poll, because it's a nice talking point. We have had issues with it here in South Africa this week. But there's a whole lot of other news for us to get through. Let's get straight into our work with Elvis.
The Claassen Board of Inquiry says suspended National Police Commissioner Ria Pierre's refusal to take responsibility led to her downfall. The De Toitskloof Pass remains closed as firefighters continue to make efforts to extinguish an extensive vegetation fire that started on top of the De Toitskloof mountain outside Paarl overnight. A Pretoria man has been arrested on a charge of assault and attempted murder after pepper spraying a group of men in another alleged racist attack in the capital. Now, those are all your headlines. Before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports field. Very good morning.
It's a very good morning. It's Friday morning. We've got lots to look forward to. We've got a massive weekend ahead of us. And by the way, gentlemen, I love your questions and your poll for this morning. I'm sure you're going to get lots of responses out of that.
Elvis, it says that they kicked him out of the competition because he's a professional.
Fantastic. Good morning to you. This is what we've got for you in the sports today.
Now Abubakar, only full in his way. Christian Bassagog, can he seal it for the indomitable Lions?
A last-ditch attempt to get back into the game backfires for Ghana as they fall to a sucker punch counter by Cameroon to go down 2-0 in the AFCON semi-final clash last night.
We must take each and every game seriously, regardless of the opponent.
The 10th edition of the Nedbank Cup is upon us, and Kaizer Chiefs' Spiwa Chabalala says Chiefs will not take any side lightly.
Our boys are looking better than ever. They're exactly at the place that I was hoping they would be. And I think tomorrow's going to be even better than what we see out there on the practice courts today.
And South Africa's Davis Cup captain Marcus Ondruska is confident that the team will do well against Estonia when they meet at the Arini Country Club for their tie this weekend. All this and more we've got for you later on in the Sports Bulletin, around about 10:40. For now, it is back to Elvis, who's got the news.
Thank you, Kendall. Top story this morning. The Claassen Board of Inquiry has recommended that suspended National Police Commissioner Ria Piecha be removed from office. Retired Judge Niels Claassen found that Piecha showed lack of understanding of the importance of her position. Parliament's police portfolio has declassified that report. It's now a public document. The Board of Inquiry was appointed by President Jacob Zuma to investigate the suspended National Police Commissioner's fitness to hold office. Now, this followed allegations that she has misled the Farnham Commission of Inquiry. Her role in the Marikana killings was also investigated. The report is subject to a High Court review. Piecha earlier challenged the findings. A man from Pretoria has been arrested on a charge of assault and attempted murder after pepper spraying a group of men in another alleged racist attack in the capital. The man allegedly pepper sprayed the men in the suburb of Valeria, and his daughter then allegedly sprayed them with a fire extinguisher. The four men struggled to breathe and were covered with white powder. This was the second alleged racist attack in Pretoria in 2 weeks after residents of Hercules attacked a group of people being moved into their neighborhood by the Metro Council. One of the men attacked yesterday says this was not an isolated incident.
We were sitting there chilling, so that one guy come here with a pepper spray. Then he sprayed those three guys, this one and that one and the other one who's there at police station. They were lying. He just come there and sprayed them. So we stand up. When we stand up, is his child or a girlfriend. She come with she took him, they go back to his farm, then they come back. He got a wheel spanner. Yeah. And then that guy has a fire extinguisher. He started spraying us. Spray us, even here, he sprayed the whole place.
As the new Nyaupe drug craze Bluetooth is fast gaining popularity in some townships, a renewed warning from the South African Medical Association that it could be fatal. Nyaupe addicts are now sharing blood to get high. SABC News filmed 3 young men who have been hooked on this dangerous narcotic concoction for years on condition that we hide their identities. Some of the following visuals may offend sensitive viewers.
It's a life on the edge. Feeding their Nyaupe addiction of more than 14 years. And it's now reached even more dangerous levels. Addicts are now not just sharing syringes, they're also sharing blood.
Bluetooth is so like in J, utosikas and issue. Magatosikas is so unekas ngapa. Magnekas minangna luto. Uteli nyaupe. Magatetu teli nyaupe. Magatos. Agasabwiseli kazlele. Uyalkipi kazlele uyenzani ungiphalona. Magatetu ungiphalona ngenzani ngilithumela kimi. So marmangilithumela kimi ngiyofana naye. Kufana ngenzeni ngibhemi nyaupe nami. Maranga bhemi nyaupe straight ngenzeni ngibhemi kazlele.
It's an expensive habit, spending about 500 rand on Nyaupe a day and injecting themselves with each other's blood, sometimes 5 times a day. But it seems the itch for a fix outweighs the risk of HIV infection and other diseases. For these addicts, the gamble is not too big.
Yona ke risk. Mara ke chomi ya ka mo tholoring ke phela le ena ke mo kwaetse. Nka itse gore ka go bala, I'm going to do anything gore le nna ke be sharp to feed my addiction.
After years of smoking the drug, it no longer gives them the desired kick. Incessant injections eventually cause veins to collapse. And medical experts have now warned about the deadly consequences of what's commonly referred to as Bluetooth.
You take the risk of acquiring blood-borne infections, and in particular infections such as HIV, hepatitis B or hepatitis C, which are highly infectious viruses. And what we're finding at the moment is somewhat concerning. The rates of these infections in those particular communities around the country, particularly in our major metropolitan areas, from Tshwane all the way to Cape Town, is significant.
Authorities are yet to determine how common Bluetooth has become, but the macabre cost-saving measure is believed to be taking some townships by storm. Criselda Lewis, SABC News, in Soshanguve.
And of course, that's our focus for the day. The question we're asking you, do you think that Nyaupa is getting out of control in our communities? It's a terrible story. We'd like to find it from you. Let us know on the Twitter handle as well as on the Facebook page. Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom. We'll read your comments during the course of the program. But let's get to our theme today, and let's get over to Eben.
Yeah, Elvis, thank you very much. Very good morning to you at home. If you've just joined us now, we're focusing on, well, the Western Sahel. The transition process at the African Union Commission has begun. This after major decisions, which include, amongst others, the readmitting of Morocco as a member earlier this week. Rabat joined the AU more than 3 decades after it withdrew from the bloc's predecessor over a row about the status of the Western Sahara. The North African Kingdom quit the AU's predecessor, the Organization of African Unity, after the body recognized Western Sahara, most of which has been controlled by Morocco since 1976. Western Sahara has condemned the decision to readmit Rabat.
The longest conflict on the continent appears to have finally been resolved, but not without a lot of robust debate. All the Francophone and Arab countries supported Morocco, while most countries from the East and South, the Anglosaxons, were against the application. A heated debate between former liberation movements and governments. The AU recognizes Western Sahara as a member state, but Morocco does not recognize Western Sahara as an independent country. The AU Constitutive Act says no country that occupies another country should be allowed as a member, but the motion was passed with a majority of 39 countries against 10.
It is something indeed unusual, but I think as the organization, we have done every necessary thing to address that issue. and therefore, that's what it's going to be. There will be follow-up other kind of activities, but what became important was that it should be accepted. But I must say on that issue, there was quite a strong exchange of views. But at the same time, we were all putting above everything unity of the continent so that we are able to move forward.
Sarahawi says it will abide by the decision even though it's not happy with the outcome.
We as Sahrawi Republic accept this approach and subscribe to this consensus, and we are fully ready to start the debate with our neighbors, the Moroccans, to look for a solution to our long-standing conflict.
It's quite clear that the matter has divided the African Union. The question now is, what is going to happen with Morocco now that it's a member of the AU? Meanwhile, the AU is preparing for a new offensive to recapture areas that are still under the control of Somalia militia group Al-Shabaab. Somalia is currently preparing to hold presidential elections. Boko Haram is also under the spotlight.
We are training the Somali National Forces with other partners to really prepare them to take over, starting from October 2018, as you know.
The AU says it remains concerned about acts of extremism on the continent, including countries such as Mali, Somalia, and South Sudan, amongst others. The situation is also compounded by poor resources in dealing with the matter. Lehana Tsotetsi, SABC News, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe has also weighed in on the Western Sahara issue. He's over the decades been steadfast about Zimbabwe's backing for Sahrawi independence. Countries led by former liberation movements on the continent, including South Africa, Zimbabwe, Namibia, Mozambique, Botswana, and Algeria, had opposed the AU's decision.
I think it's lack of ideology. They have not had the same revolutionary experience as all of us. And there is too much reliance on their erstwhile colonizers. So you have, France still calling the tube. And very disappointing.
And which way
the rules,
is Sahrawi now?
Well, we will still fight it within and see whether, in fact, Morocco is abandoning its occupation of parts of Morocco. You see, as things are at the moment, Sahrawi claims that Morocco is occupying part of its territory. And Morocco has been denying, and Morocco has been even going ahead saying there is no opposition to the people of Sahrawi coming together with Morocco. Which is the matter which is contested, you see. And the matter, mind you, has gone up to the United Nations. And it was decided that if Morocco argues and claims that Sahrawi indeed, in terms of his people, is not opposed to being part of Morocco. Let there be a referendum. And we have been waiting for the referendum, and Morocco has been resisting that, the holding of a referendum. That is a referendum to be held by Sahrawi. And so we will have to fight the matter, both at the level of the AU and the level of the United Nations. But unfortunately for now, we had not established a court. If we had established a court, which would then be the authority to declare that it is not correct, it is not right, it is not legal for Morocco to be admitted, you see, and until it gives up its claim to parts of Sahrawi, then the matter would have been easier. But there is no court yet. We are still to establish that court above. But you could see others are saying, oh, just let us go in, let us allow Morocco to come in, and so on. you could see that as far as we are concerned, rules don't matter. It is the material aspect that matters. And Morocco has been working for quite a long time, building mosques here, giving money and that kind of thing. But the game is not lost. We will fight the issue to the end. But anyway, that is quite a blow for some of us who believe in rules, in the principles being observed, and would have wanted to see Morocco, you see, declare at least that yes, they will give up their claim of occupation.
Of course, we've asked the Moroccan ambassador to come in and share their side of the story. They've respectfully declined an interview, but after a short break, well, after the break really, we'll get the views of both the ANC and the economic freedom fighters who've pronounced on it here in South Africa. But before we get there, let's just do a little bit of housekeeping. Of course, we're running a poll today on a story that's had a lot of South Africans up in arms this week because some people claim that they can't get work because their looks count against them. So we ask you, should your looks count during a job interview? That is 138 votes in right now. 27% say yes, it should count. 46% say no. And another 27% say sometimes. Sometimes, depending on the job, one would think. Tweeting us on it, Oscar says, Newsroom, but what defines ugly? If we say someone is ugly, what criteria are we using? Are we now discriminating against others, is the question. Fair question, Oscar. And who decides what is beauty? What is beauty anyhow? There's very much a Western idea of what beauty might be. We see it in magazines and the like. Doc Moses comes, he says, I always get worried when the recruitment agencies ask for my photo when I'm not a model. Yeah, interesting one. You're not a model, you're there to do the job. Bunati tweets us, he says, Newsroom, you can't have the looks, but you can't do the job sometimes. They don't count, he says, talking about the job search. Lorato Mohatle comes in and says, the only way to get rid of this dilemma is that let there be a man-to-man and woman-to-woman interviewer, she says. Very interesting take on that one. Certainly changes the dynamic of that discussion. Lots happening on social media. Let's have a look at where we are today. Of course, we'll start with that shocking finding that we brought you here on SABC News. Griselda Lewis at her very best once again, that Nyape drug users share a high by injecting themselves with another person's blood. This dangerous action has been dubbed Bluetooth. That's the hashtag to look out for, Bluetooth. Only in South Africa would we call it Bluetooth, I tell you. The Nation is still talking about the biggest story of the week. Of course, that's the Life Sedimeni tragedy. This case of neglect of 2,000 psychiatric patients who were transferred to unregistered NGOs. It has emerged that 94 patients died. Of course, last night, it was a big function here in Johannesburg, the launch of the Nedbank Cup, and it's the 10th anniversary. So we'll have to wait and see what is in store. Lots of it, lots being promised, of course. Nedbank Cup, look out for that one. Then AFCON 27, well, the finalists have emerged, and Cameroon surprised. Well, they will take on Egypt in the finals in a much anticipated match. Ghana fans at the stadium, well, they were absolutely devastated last night. But Cameroon, well, they celebrated deep into the night after an unexpected victory, one has to say. Then, Beyoncé. Yeah, Beyoncé is trending once again because more photos of her, the ridiculous pregnancy shoot is what they call it. More pictures have emerged. Here's one of those pictures He also announced that she'll be performing at the Grammys. Let's take a look now at our picture of the day. Of course, if you're down in Cape Town or down in the Paarl area, this is something that really concerns you. Rick Nettling, he tweeted this picture, and it's captioned, "Another big fire at the Kloof." Of course, there you can see the Kloof mountain in Paarl, well on fire down in the Cape. And it's still not under control, and the wind is blowing. Now, let's take a look at our comment of the day. This one comes from Vuvu or Vuyani Njobani, who says, "Nyaupe addicts in Shoshanguve exchange blood through a syringe to share the high because it's cost effective and it's called Bluetooth." Batong, what is happening in our country is what he is asking, and I think many people will be asking that question with regards to this today as well. Now, don't forget our question of the day, of course, is on that, and you can tweet us there what you think. Let's take a look now at what's happening in the courtrooms here. We'll start in Cape Town. That's the question of the day. Is it getting out of control? Cape Town, where triple murder accused Henry van Bedra is expected to appear in the High Court for a pre-trial hearing. The 21-year-old van Bedra is alleged to have hacked his parents and brother to death at their Stellenbosch home. His sister, who was 16 years old at the time, well, she sustained serious head wounds. Van Bedra is out on bail of 100,000 rand. The trial is expected to get underway next month. Then, in the northwest, 3 Mozambican nationals caught with 2 rhino horn in the Bay Area. They are expected to apply for bail. The 3 are expected to appear in the Ganyesa Magistrates Court. They were arrested following a dehorning of a rhino at a local game farm. Police searched a white bucky and found the 2 horns. We'll keep you updated on that story as we also speak to Bonnie Debot about that. Let's take a short break. We'll be right back after this.
What is a national anthem, and why do we need national anthems?
A national anthem becomes an instrument to foster social cohesion, identity, to create a sense of identity of a country.
It does happen that people feel that they cannot commit to what the national anthem does.
Unity is not formed from the sky. People don't just despise the national anthem, but it is because of certain things that are actually happening. The issue of languages, for instance. The issue of apartheid statues and monuments.
The ANC has described the African Union's decision to readmit Morocco to the organization as regrettable, saying that it represents a significant setback to the Sahrawi people's struggle for independence in the Western Sahara. The continental body took that decision following intense lobbying by Morocco and heated debates. Now, for more on the story, we now join from NEC's Subcommittee on International Relations, Edna Mulewa. A very good morning to you, ma'am, and welcome.
Good morning, Elvis, and good morning to all your viewers. Thank you for having me.
Now, the ANC says it's regrettable that the readmission of Morocco to the African Union. Why?
Let's put it this way, Elvis, and to the viewers, that we, as the African National Congress, have been part of the former liberation movement, and we continue, therefore, to look at ourselves from a perspective that says we actually sympathize with everybody who has been like we were and who continues to be like we were. And therefore, our question here is not so much about anti-Morocco, but pro the Sahrawi, Western Sahara people's liberation. And we do better. And in fact, it still continues to be a high necessity that we have the African Union playing a bigger role, better in ensuring that the only remaining area and country on the continent, which is Western Sahara, gets liberated from Morocco's occupation. And therefore, for us, that was a crucial discussion to be held at a political level, and it is a political question. Instead of just saying, let's postpone the freedoms of the people of Western Sahara and consider some of the views that we hear that people are saying, oh yes, when we have the Morocco inside our home, we'll then only then be able to speak to them about this particular matter. That is postponing the liberation of our people in Western Sahara. And we do think that this is a matter that's very regrettable and actually to be viewed that way, especially, Elvis, if a decision is taken in a manner that you have just described now, which is following lobbying. Lobbying is never just an easy, open exercise of discussion, persuading one another, listening to one another. But it is a discussion that takes place in corners where some people are convinced separately there, and then you come with a preconceived mind and having decided. That's unfortunate. That's what we're saying.
Would you say that the decision to readmit Morocco perhaps is a betrayal to the people of the Western Sahara in the struggle for freedom and liberation?
In fact, this is exactly how we view it. It is a betrayal of the Western Sahara people, especially because we know, and as leaders in the African Union, and by the way, I'm sorry that we sounded like we are criticizing the African Union. We are part of the African Union, but we do think that as leaders, we can, and as political parties, we can advise. This is just a mere advice, and this is a stance that we believe is a right stance, to say that, yes, indeed, it is a betrayal, especially because we knew quite ahead of time, quite a while ago, that for 41 years, people of Western Sahara have been sitting in that camp, and the UN has tried to resolve this problem. The former Secretary General of the UN has been to Western Sahara to try and get the resolution that was taken by the UN to be facilitated and really get through, so that people of Western Sahara can once and for all decide that they are a sovereign nation, manage their own affairs in their own country. So because we know that, and we have known that, we are not focusing on that matter as the African Union, but we rather focus on just a mere readmission and say we'll talk to them when they are inside. It's not satisfactory for us, and I don't think it's really fair, a decision to, or rather a route to follow.
Now, 39 out of the 54 countries voted in favor of Morocco's admission. What does it say about the 39 countries, though?
Well, this is exactly what I was referring to earlier on. I'm saying if a decision is taken based on lobbying, yes, lobbying has to happen, but beyond lobbying, when a discussion takes place, by the way, we are also aware and know very well that in the discussion itself, in the plenary of our leaders at the summit of the AU, there was a lengthy debate, robust debate, which we do believe that, in fact, there was a necessity for our leaders to listen to one another and hear beyond what we had when we were lobbied elsewhere, so that we can open up our mind and decide on this matter politically, not just by casting votes, after listening and being convinced differently. Because I'm told that actually we are aware that the debates that are pro the support of Western Sahara were strong too, and they needed to be heeded. And we are not saying, by the way, that Morocco should not have been readmitted, but then probably the first thing to do should have been to look at the statutes themselves. Remember, the founding statutes of the AU, which AU did not have to go against as they did right now, part of it says that any country has got liberty to be admitted in an organization like the AU. And the condition is that you've got to respect the borders of other countries. So there is not quite a respect for the Western Sahara borders by Morocco. And therefore, that part needed a thorough debate by the AU to say that indeed we do know that this is part of our founding statute and have got to respect and stand by this part of our founding statute, and therefore deal with that part first, and then only admit Morocco after they would have dealt with the occupation or no occupation of the Western Sahara. So for us, this issue of discussing the founding statute was a priority, and it continues to be a priority even now.
Now, President Jacob Zuma described the readmission of Morocco as difficult but necessary. That sentiment, does it speak to what South Africa voted for, and did South Africa vote against the readmission of Morocco?
Let me say that what President Zuma said is what I described earlier on when I was saying that we are not anti-Morocco. We are pro the liberation of the people of Western Sahara first. And then the readmission of Morocco can happen, should happen. We love Morocco to be part of the African continent and the AU, but it mustn't be at the expense of other people. It mustn't be against the founding statutes of the AU as it stands right now. We can't make laws and then ignore them. At whatever expense, it shouldn't happen. So I'm saying, yes, as South Africa, as it's obvious that, the 39 minus 54, those countries, all of them, which South Africa is part of the minus 39, is actually where our vote was. And our vote must be understood not to be a vote against and anti-Morocco, but it's a vote for the Western Sahara people whose freedom and liberations must not be postponed, not even for a minute.
Now, with Morocco now inside the AU tent and so desperate to improve its relations with the other African countries, are you hopeful that there may be a new leverage for African leaders to pressure it to move forward on that referendum on self-determination, which remains such a major sticking point?
Well, we hope so. Indeed, I've personally had a discussion with the leadership of Morocco, some of them in the foreign affairs, in my counterpart, who also was sent to come and speak to me in my capacity as IR chair of the African National Congress and also a part of government of South Africa. Yes, I have observed that indeed Morocco is quite keen to improve the relations. That much we don't doubt. I've heard it with my own ears. I've also advised them that indeed this question of Western Sahara resolution is necessary. If there's anywhere else where South Africa can play a role, I think we could play that role, but we are, as I say, we are not anti-Morocco. Yes, we do believe that it is necessary to resolve that matter, but it's, as you recall, and as many of us may know, that where we got stuck is where a vote has to happen of a referendum. And that referendum is not enabled by the mere fact that there are allegations that the people of Morocco have moved to live in Western Sahara, and therefore they are part of being there does suggest, and they suggest that they should be part of voting with the people of Western Sahara. And that is not sitting well with the Western Sahara people. That's a question that has to be resolved at the UN level. And we do believe that this is the only opportunity that the African Union had to really work with Morocco, not anti-Morocco, but with Morocco, to get this question resolved. Because we are leaders on the continent. Morocco is, if they want to become part of us, we've got to work with them, and we have to work with them. And this is perhaps what we needed to consider first. Thank you very much, Elvis.
That was the chairperson of the ANC, NEC, Edna Molewa. Express block is spokesperson Mbuyiseni Ndlozi now joins us. Thank you so much for joining us. Would you say that the decision by the AU to readmit Morocco in is perhaps a betrayal of the people of Western Sahara?
Yes, not only that, it's actually a betrayal of what the AU itself stands for. Remember that the very values that constitute African unity is the values of decolonization, that the founding fathers were fighting against colonization that existed in the continent, believed in. So your association with people who disrespect and disregard other people's rights to self-determination should be seen as a contradiction to your own values. And of course, it's a betrayal to the people of Western Sahara and to Polisario. So in effect, it has rendered the African Union reactionary.
In saying that, is it not perhaps a better idea to have Morocco back into the AU where these issues can be resolved and be talked about between Morocco and the African Union?
No, it's like thinking or hoping that you could participate in the liberation of the people of Palestine by having dinner and tea with Israel. It's not a conversation that should be negotiable. People's right to self-determination should not be a negotiation. The people of Western Sahara have a right. They shouldn't negotiate. They shouldn't sit over a table to negotiate their right to exist and their right to form a sovereign state. And so, historically, boycotts, divestments, and sanctions has been the most efficient way to get decolonization to happen. So the isolation of Morocco, what you would have expected the African Union to do was to mount its isolation of Morocco in the continent, not war, and that's the most peaceful way to resolve conflicts like that these days, is to internationally isolate them in terms of not only political and diplomatic relations, but economic, sports, intellectual, and everything else. Isolate them until they institute a referendum without the Moroccan people in Western Sahara.
Will that not prolong the issues within the Western Sahara and Morocco?
But they've been prolonged already because nothing has actually happened. The strategy at the moment has been toothless. Now it's going to be mouthless because you've actually readmitted and given them the power to sit at an equal table with you when they don't recognize the values that you stand for. But I mean, I think the tragedy, the bigger tragedy here is the fact that the African National Congress has actually lost influence in the continent.
How
I think,
so?
I mean, they were unable to lobby against Morocco. They were unable to bring the entire continent against a decision that they took, that the African Union ultimately took. I mean, 39 countries.
Out of 54?
That just shows you the ANC has lost influence in the continent. The ANC used to be, as the oldest liberation movement in the continent, it used to be very influential. It held a moral high ground. Actually, maybe about 18 months ago, if we all recall, President Mbeki was on the record to have said, people across the continent don't take this country, the leadership of this country seriously anymore. You can replay it. And it's not only that. I mean, the job of the current Minister of International Relations as well, it should bring a serious question to what is she doing, losing a type of a vote of so significant proportions to the rest of the 39 countries. It shows that they've lost influence in the continent.
Winston Churchill said, united we stand, divided we fall. As Africa, shouldn't we unite in order to resolve these African issues on our own soil? I mean,
you are divided because this is false unity. Unity has to be on the basis of values and principles. There's no reason for, I mean, this Steve Biko called it, you know, we sit over the table and have tea and biscuits and we think that that might push liberation with people who don't recognize us as human beings. So Morocco doesn't recognize, to not recognize Western Sahara's self-determination rights is not to recognize them as human beings, because the very first duty of unity in the continent has to be over the principle of self-Sahara. So if they are inside the fold, it's as false because it's an offense to the values that you represent.
Now, the EFF is calling on social movements across the continent and around the globe and the diaspora to isolate the government of Morocco through sanctions that you called for earlier. How are you going to manage that?
Look, that's how the minister was, the deputy minister was on the aspect that you just played now, and she says, because we are sympathetic because we used to be in that position. What did we do when we were in that position? Not only did we ask the continental bodies to isolate the apartheid state, we asked them to boycott. We asked them to end diplomatic. We asked them to end business interest or economic ties as well as sports. Apartheid was isolated. That's what should be happening. You shouldn't just say, Morocco, we recognize its right of existence, but we don't agree with its occupation of Western Sahara and it must not be part of the continental body. You must actually isolate it. It means that you must recall your mission from Morocco. Your diplomatic mission in Morocco must be recalled. If you really regret this decision, you must actually recall the ambassador of South Africa to Morocco. He must come back and be here at home, and you institute more, you mount and lead a campaign of the isolation of Morocco until the referendum is implemented, and it's implemented on the terms that the Saharan people have said. And that means every citizen of Morocco doesn't participate. And that's how we're going to arrive at a solution where you're actually going to find that the people who are living there in most of the cases for the past many, many years in a situation of without equal rights, without the rights of self-determination, they're going to say they don't want to be part of Morocco.
In conclusion, Mr. Ndlozi, how do you think as the EFF this should have been resolved in the first place?
Look, the reality is the African Union should have not admitted Morocco. The condition should have always been a respect of the borders, as the founding statutes say. But beyond that, I think that they should have mounted that rejection with a lot more, and that is boycotts, divestments, and sanctions, to isolate it completely, to isolate Morocco completely and not be in any association with them. That would have fast-tracked the process. I mean, as soon as the UN took a resolution in '76 and the rest of the world in '84 isolated South Africa through disinvestments, by 1990, apartheid was negotiating with the ANC. That was like in a space of 6-5 years. So you've got to be, that's what works. It works better than bullets and guns and bombs. So we've got to implement boycotts, divestment, and sanctions in the international isolation of Morocco. That's what will bring the solution. That's what the African Union should have done.
Mr. Ndlozi, I've got a lot more questions, but unfortunately, time is not on our side. Thank you so much for joining us here in studio. That was the EFF national spokesperson, Mbuyiseni Ndlozi. We'll take a short break and we'll be right back after that.
Today provide news updates giving a wealth of knowledge, breaking stories and crossing live for you. We follow business developments intensely. Experts and analysts tackle all challenging issues for you. We cover stories locally and abroad to keep you informed. We cover all sporting codes just for you. We are sure to give you weather to be ready for the day. Stay tuned to News Today at 3 p.m. from Monday to Friday on SABC News.
Water-wise, water is an essential need. The scarcity of it could lead to loss of many lives, including livestock, plants, and much more. It requires us to use it sparingly and responsibly in times of need, failing which our taps and sanitation will not function. For more on water and weather issues, stay tuned to News Today, every Friday at 5:45 Central African Time. SABC News, making you water-wise.
The most important data about the economy for December was the credit extension statistics for the month. Then there was also the unexpectedly large foreign purchasing managers index. That's reflecting more positive sentiment among manufacturers in that period. And next in January, we also saw new vehicle sales of the Northwest University School of Business. Donald Trump, the president of the US, had another tumultuous week in office. So, to help us unpack these issues, we are joined by Professor Raymond Parsons of the Northwest University School of Business and Governance in our weekly slot of the economy. Professor, welcome.
Good morning, Elvis.
Let's begin with the good news about the trade balance, with imports falling and exports rising, as well as vehicle sales looking much.
Well, I think, Elvis, you'll recall we've often spoken about the tale of two deficits that we have to worry about. But so this in us being able to pay our export front. And in fact, this is probably largely due to the somewhat better commodity prices on the world markets for those things that we sell. And also, of course, I think that we've had a fairly competitive exchange rate. And I think those twin factors have actually helped to boost exports. The downside is that, of course, imports have fallen. Now, you may say, well, hurrah, but the fact is, it means that many business people are not importing any equipment, they're not investing. So, in fact, the fall in imports, to some extent, reflects the weak economy. So it's two sides. Last 2 years, our exports have grown, and that's good news.
Do they tell us anything about their position where they are in 2017?
Well, I think all households that are watching this interview will know what the pincher movement is. It's either from unemployment, if you've lost your job, without credit, or you're not going to get credit. So I think that's the of inflation. You go into the supermarkets, you see going to change very much this year. It'll still be a sort of vulnerable point in our economic outlook, bearing also in mind, I think, that many households and consumers are beginning to pick up the message that in the budget, which comes at the end of this month, there may be increased taxes. That's going to also squeeze some of the disposable income, or might even perhaps put up some prices if they're indirect taxes. So I think that element of uncertainty among consumers explains why they're being very cautious about household debt and are wanting to wind it down, or at least not take out extra debt.
Talking about uncertainty, the latest Northwest University School of Business Policy Uncertainty Index showed that policy uncertainty in South Africa was lower in the fourth quarter 2016 than in the third quarter of last year. What were the main factors explaining and driving this, Professor?
Well, I think there were 3 or 4 factors in the fourth quarter of last year which helped to stabilize the level of policy uncertainty. Firstly, of course, there was the good news that we were not downgraded by the credit rating agencies. I think that was a reprieve, only for 6 months maybe, but nonetheless. Then was also had the issue of a very good mini budget, which gave out a strong message from government and from the Treasury that we do want to get our public finances under control. We do want to control government spending. We don't want to borrow too much, because if you don't control spending and you don't control borrowing, you have to put up taxes, which is where we're going to end up anyway, but at least the margin has been narrowed. And then also, I think the fact that we had a fairly strong currency, that was also, I think, a stabilizing factor in the whole environment of uncertainty. And then finally, the fact that the charges against the Minister of Finance were dropped in the fourth quarter. I think that all helped to explain why we got a degree of stabilization in the level of policy uncertainty in South Africa.
What do you believe, though, Professor, will be the driving forces influencing this policy and uncertainty perceptions, one way or the other, as we move towards 2015? Because there's a number of issues here. If we look at the examples of the events such as the Cabinet Lekgotla that happened this week, there was also the State of the Nation address next week, which is coming, as well as the possibility of a cabinet reshuffle, and then, of course, the budget in February 2017.
Well, I think, Elvis, what we've got to dig down here, if we put a dipstick into all these events, what has been the common factor? Every time there's been a spokesman from the ANC top brass or for the Lekgotla, it's been top of our agenda is the economy. So I think there's a recognition that we're not doing as we ought to do. There are big challenges, they have not been resolved yet, and that we ought to have a much better economic performance. What we should be doing about it is obviously a matter which the ANC, among other parties, has been heavily seized with. Now what's important is these events, such as the State of the Nation, whether there's a cabinet reshuffle, who's in, who's out once the music stops, as it were, the issue of the budget, what taxes will go up or not, these will all influence the level of confidence and the levels of uncertainty, not only among business people, but also by the man in the street. He wants to know what will be the future direction. And so, of course, the next big opportunity will be the State of the Nation address next week. And in fact, the Cabinet Lekgotla has been devoted not only to our economy, but to what should the message be. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity for the President to spell out in a consistent and a coherent way what is the path forward for the country and for our economy, so that we can reduce uncertainty.
Trump continues to dominate the global conversation. What can we read from all of this?
Well, I think it was President Obama said that, of course, elections have consequences. And, of course, he was pointing to what has been happening now that President Trump is in the White House. We said last week that when you look at what he's doing, what you see is what you get. I don't think anyone should be under any sort of illusions. So there have been a number of important decisions. But I also see the signs of a team emerging. Now that the cabinet is being approved, you're starting to see some moderating voices that perhaps things could be a little different and so forth. So that as President Trump builds up a team, so I think you will see a more coherent message, whether you like it or not, but it'll be a more coherent message. I think for South Africa, one of the interesting things for the business community was the executive order about deregulation. I think that will find much resonance here. And I think that's an important issue even for our own policymakers, that we must lighten regulation, especially for small business. So I would simply say in conclusion, all the factors that we've now listed, whether it's the State of the Nation or the budget or whatever it may be, this is an important month in February. We may have the State of the Nation, the budget, and a cabinet reshuffle. So my advice, as always, watch the space.
Professor, thank you so much for your time joining us here. That was economist Professor Rowan Parsons from the Northwest University School of Business and Governance in our weekly slot of the economy.
Water-wise, water is an essential need. The scarcity of it could lead to loss of many lives, including livestock, plants, and much more. It requires us to use it sparingly and responsibly in times of need, failing which our taps and sanitation will not function. For more on water and weather issues, stay tuned to News Today, every Friday at 5:45 Central African Time. SABC News, making you water-wise.
back here with us here at the Newsroom show. It's 10 o'clock Central African time. That is a very good morning to you if you've just joined us. I'm Kendall Mahalati. Good morning, Kendall.
A hearty good morning to you. It's Friday morning.
Yeah, Friday, best day of the week as always. Hope that you're enjoying this Friday, everybody. Of course, our focus this morning is on, well, it's a sensational story, really. Nyaupe, this new drug craze called Bluetooth, which is fast gaining popularity in the townships here in South Africa. But the way that it's administered is shocking, isn't it?
It is shocking. It's a use of intravenous, basically it's an intravenous drug now.
Yeah, it's using the other person's blood to get high. So we ask you this question: is Nyaupe getting out of control in our communities? And what do we do to get a hold of it? Let's have a look what you guys have been tweeting us so far. Barry Martin says, Newsroom, the drug addicts are totally sick people and they try to create their own universe with their stupid ideas, says Barry Martin.
That's harsh, Barry. Munabi Simbonda says, this Nyaupe is killing our future leaders. Jobs must be created so the youth cannot be bored.
Yeah, Monwabisi on point there. Aaron the Great, he says, Newsroom, Bluetooth or stroke Nyaupe is heartbreaking. Yes, it is. Deadly new invention, a health risk, it's a national crisis and government must intervene. I think that is a feeling that many people share.
No, absolutely. Doc Moses Bilane weighs in with the drug saga shocked me when I saw it on 4/4 last night. When I was on the phone, I was silenced.
Yeah, we're all kind of silenced. You just cannot get your head around it. Of course, Griselda done a fantastic story on it. Stay on this channel because we'll replay that story. It's about 3.5 minutes. In a couple of minutes' time, we'll replay that story. Tweet us if you have views on this new Bluetooth Nyaupe drug. Now, we're also running a poll, of course. There's been a big story this week about looks. Should looks count when you get a job, Kendall? Should your looks count during a job interview? Simple one. 158 votes in already.
Absolutely. And we've given them 3 options. And we've got 28% that say yes, they do count, and they should. 46% say no, they should not. And these are the PC people, of which I try to be as well. But reality says 26% sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah. Maybe if you're front of house, I don't know. Is it even legal to say you have to be beautiful to work in the front of the house? I don't know. Michael Mditra said it does not count at all. It shouldn't count at all, Michael, is what we say.
And Munabi Simbonda comes in with nowhere do looks include including your CV in your job. Your CV should speak for itself, not your looks.
Yeah. Bantu comes, he says, Newsroom, it's a very unfair to focus on looks. What is the best look? Yes, that's the question. Who decides? According to WOM, is that look good? Character and experience must count. Yes, Bantu, there are some recruitment agents who disagree with you.
Yes, Oscar Mkamucheling says, interesting enough, Mkamucheling means receive me, accept me. But what defines ugly? If we say someone is ugly, what criteria are we using? Are we now discriminating against others?
Yeah, it is discriminatory, but that's the nature of the interview process at some point. Even, you know, in some jobs they say we need these characteristics in order for you to get the job. It's unfair, definitely is. We will look at it. But so go vote there and send us a tweet because it's great to hear what you guys think. That's what Newsroom is all about. Kendall, but we've got a lot of other news. Let's get into our work. Time for us to give you the top stories. The Klassen Board of Inquiry says suspended National Police Commissioner Ria Piecha's refusal to take responsibility led to her downfall. In the Western Cape, the Detroit Skoofplaas remains closed as firefighters continue to make efforts to extinguish an extensive vegetation fire that started at the top of the Detroit mountain outside Paarl overnight. And a Pretoria man has now been arrested on a charge of assault and attempted murder after pepper spraying a group of men in another alleged racist attack in the capital. Those are the top stories on the Newsroom show right now. Let's go over to Kendall to tell us what's happening in the world of sport.
Evan, thank you very much. I woke up this Friday morning thinking, wow, what a weekend. We've got a whole lot of previews that we've got for our viewers today, from sevens to tennis, as well as an AFCON final on the cards.
Brilliant.
Yeah, good morning to you. This is what we've got for you in sports today.
Now a Boubacar only full in his way. Christian Bassagog, can he seal it for the indomitable Lions?
A last-ditch attempt to get back into the game backfires for Ghana as they fall to a sucker punch counter by Cameroon to go down 2-0 in their AFCON semi-final clash last night.
We must take each and every game seriously, regardless of the opponent.
The 10th edition of the Nedbank Cup is upon us, and Kaizer Chiefs' Spiwa Chabalala says Chiefs will not take any side lightly.
Our boys are looking better than ever. They're exactly at the place that I was hoping they would be. And I think tomorrow's going to be even better than what we see out there on the practice courts today.
South Africa's Davis Cup captain Marcus Ondruska is confident that the team will do well against Estonia when they meet at the Irene Country Club for their tie this weekend. All this and more we've got for you in more detail at 10:40. For now, though, we've got the news with Eben.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kendall. Very good morning. If you've just joined us here on the show. Now, the Klassen Board of Inquiry has recommended that suspended National Police Commissioner Ria Piecha be removed from office. Retired Judge Niels Klassen found that Piecha showed a lack of understanding of the importance of her position. Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Police has declassified the report. It's now a public document. The Board of Inquiry was appointed by President Jacob Zuma to investigate the suspended National Police Commissioner's fitness to hold office. This followed allegations that she had misled the Farlam Commission of Inquiry. Her role in the Marikana killings was also investigated. The report is subject to a High Court review now. Piecha earlier challenged the findings. A man from Pretoria has been arrested on a charge of assault and attempted murder after pepper spraying a group of men in another alleged racist attack in the capital. The man allegedly pepper sprayed the men in the suburb of Valeria, and his daughter then allegedly sprayed them with a fire extinguisher afterwards. The four men struggled to breathe and were covered with white powder. It was the second alleged racist attack in Pretoria in 2 weeks after residents of Hercules attacked a group of people being moved into their neighborhood by the Metro Council. One of the men attacked yesterday says this was not an isolated incident.
We were sitting there chilling, so that was guy come here with a pepper spray. Then he sprayed those three guys, this one and that one and the other one who's there at police station. They were lying. He just come there and sprayed them. So we stand up. When we stand up, his child or a girlfriend, she come with she took him, they go back to his farm, then they come back. He got a wheel spanner. Yeah. And then that guy has a fire extinguisher. He started spraying us. Spray us, even here, he sprayed the whole place.
Firefighters have worked through the night in an effort to douse the blaze at the top of Toitskloof Pass outside Paarl in the Western Cape. Residents have meanwhile been evacuated from their homes as the fire is said to be spreading rapidly. The blaze is being fanned by a strong southeasterly wind. Firefighters and their vehicles have been placed strategically to protect buildings. No damage to property or injuries have been reported thus far. 3 helicopters, 12 firefighting vehicles with 30 personnel and 3 ground teams have been deployed to the region. The Toitskloof Pass is still closed to traffic. Motorists are being urged to use the Huguenot Tunnel on the N1 instead. Now, on Wednesday, the 1st of February, the price of petrol rose by 2%, while that of diesel rose by 1.85%. This raised the price of petrol and diesel in Gauteng by 29 and 21 cents per litre, respectively. Just a month earlier, South Africans experienced a 50-cent rise in the price of petrol and a 39-cent increase in the price of diesel. Economic experts say this rise in fuel prices is the result of a weaker rand as well as a response to OPEC's November agreement to cut its overall oil production by 1.2 million barrels a day in an attempt to stabilize the falling oil prices caused by what is called a global oil glut. An increase in fuel prices always sees many of life's essential costs such as food and transportation increase as well. The Reserve Bank recently stated that decreased inflation in food prices may offset the effects of the expected fuel price increases. The rising trend in energy prices is likely to make this balance short-lived. Now, joining us from our Pretoria studio to discuss the fuel price hikes and their effect on the economy is Rocco Stradom. He's the director at Elegant Fuels. Very good morning to you, Rocco. Thanks for being with us here on Newsroom.
Morning. Thank you for having me.
Rocco, just give me a quick idea. We've seen why actually has the price of fuel increased twice in the space of a month, considering that we saw an almost 2% price decrease in December last year?
Well, I think it's a continuation of the effect of the OPEC cuts, and our weak currency isn't helping. It did offset a little bit of the rising price in Brent crude. If we didn't have a slightly the fuel price increase.
Now, we're witnessing some of the effects of the agreement to cut oil production by OPEC. What's the outlook for 2017 like? How's the oil price, the price of oil and then the price of fuel, how's it going to fluctuate, you think, in the next 12 months?
Well, I don't think the oil cuts by OPEC were that effective. Since some economists seem to think that the price of fuel is going to rise by 90 cents a litre, R1 a litre per month. I think largely this is to do with what's happening in America with the shale oil, and especially President Donald Trump saying that he wants to put America first by using American energy. Last week he signed off on 2 big pipelines, Keystone XL and Dakota, which will see oil coming in from Canada. So the Americans are largely not depending on OPEC in the future. So with this in mind, we at Elegant Fuel foresee oil trading between $50 and $60 a barrel. So the increases will more likely depend on what the currency, what the South African currency in terms of the dollar is, and investor confidence in South Africa.
So we're probably not in for massive shocks then this year with regards to the fuel price?
Well, it's going to be a sustained price increase. Like I say, dependent on what our currency is going to be. Oil is slightly ticking upwards. I think it's sitting at $56 per barrel today. So yes, well, we'll have to wait and see. These things, it's not a hard and fast, but that's what we expect. Obviously, there's a fuel tax coming in April. So no matter what happens, for the next 2 to 3 months, we will see an increase.
How does this affect things like my pocket? And then we've got wage negotiations coming in various sectors in the next month. How do these things really affect the bottom line, if we can call it that?
Good question. The fuel price increase affects almost a third of the input cost on transport. Unfortunately, the transporters can't absorb this cost anymore, and that gets passed directly to the consumer, be it in the retail sector or the commercial sector. And ultimately, it's at grassroots levels where we find this effect to be the most disturbing on the consumers, because ultimately they are the ones that have to carry the burden.
They seem to be on a more aggressive path, it looks like. Are you expecting further cuts from them in the next 10, 12 months?
I can't see OPEC cutting anymore. I can't think they can afford to. The market is so rigorous. There was an article this morning stating that America will most likely export more oil in 2017 than OPEC would with the cuts. So I can't see them cutting anymore, that they can afford to cut anymore, not in 2017 at least.
Finally, before I let you go, just give us 1 or 2 practical tips for us South Africans. How do you come to terms, or how do you future-proof yourself, if we can call it that, against these kind of increases that are coming?
Well, I think we as South Africans have to look at our consumption of fuel and to change our driving habits. I think one of the 2 things that we can do is plan our trips better so that we don't get stuck in traffic a lot. I mean, if you're in traffic, you use a lot of fuel. And also, I think we as companies should incentivize economical driving. If you are, if you deliver a package and you're on time and you use less fuel, your company should incentivize the employees for doing that, because then, you know, we use less fuel as a country.
Well, Rocco, we almost had bicycle lanes here in Johannesburg, but that seems to be gone now, unfortunately, my friend. Thanks for joining us today. That's Rocco Stradium. He's the director at Elegant Fuel, and he tells us that, well, we're going to see a steady increase of the fuel price for the next year. Not good. Well, I recorded that interview late yesterday with Rocco Stradium. Interesting views that he has. But let's now go to, well, the most talked about story here in South Africa and on all our news platforms right now. Now, as the new Nyaupe drug craze called Bluetooth is fast gaining popularity in some townships, a renewed warning from the South African Medical Association that it could be fatal. Nyaupe addicts are now sharing blood to get high. SABC News filmed 3 young men who've been hooked on the dangerous narcotic concoction for years on condition that we hide their identities. Now, some of the following visuals may offend sensitive viewers.
It's a life on the edge. Feeding their Nyaupe addiction of more than 14 years. And it's now reached even more dangerous levels. Addicts are now not just sharing syringes, they're also sharing blood.
Bluetooth iso makaqeda ukubetha like nje uyenza udosikazi angisho makadosikazi so unegazi ngapha makunegazi mina nginalutho utheli Nyaupe makaqeda ukuthela Nyaupe makadosa akasabuyisela igazi lela uyalikhipha igazi lela uyenzani ungipha lona makaqeda ungipha lona ngenzani ngilithumela kini so mara mangilithumela kini ngiyofana naye kufana ngenzeni ngibhema Nyaupe nami mara ngabhema Nyaupe straight ngenzeni ngibhema igazi lami.
It's an expensive habit, spending about 500 rand on Nyaupe a day and injecting themselves with each other's blood, sometimes 5 times a day. But it seems the itch for a fix outweighs the risk of HIV infection and other diseases. For these addicts, the gamble is not too big.
Yona ke risk mara ke chomi aka ke motho loreng ke phela le ena ke mo kwaetse nka itse gore ka hobala I'm going to do anything gore le nna ke be sharp to feed my addiction.
After years of smoking the drug, it no longer gives them the desired kick. Incessant injections eventually cause veins to collapse. And medical experts have now warned about the deadly consequences of what's commonly referred to as Bluetooth.
You take the risk of acquiring blood-borne infections, and in particular infections such as HIV, hepatitis B or hepatitis C, which are highly infectious viruses. And what we're finding at the moment is somewhat concerning. The rates of these infections in those particular communities around the country, particularly in our major metropolitan areas, from Tshwane all the way to Cape Town, is significant.
Authorities are yet to determine how common Bluetooth has become, but the macabre cost-saving measure is believed to be taking some townships by storm. Criselda Lewis, SABC News, in Soshanguve.
Yeah, another terrific piece of journalism there by our own Criselda Lewis. Of course, we're asking you the question of the day, and the question of the day is Nyapi getting out of control in our community? Should we crack down more on it? Should we take a tougher stance on it? Well, some of you have been tweeting, yes, we should be doing this. This one from Mlungis, he says, this Nyapi problem seems to be getting worse. I hope it doesn't do to SA what crack cocaine did to the USA. Mlu, it's already happening, my friend. Bantu says, Newsroom, these kids think they're vampires now. Yeah, they're sharing each other's blood. I am Muli Malong. I says, why is Al so reluctant to decisively deal with the drug dealers? We can learn one or two things from President Duterte and Widodo. Yes, kill the drug dealers, she says. Kiwa says, Newsroom, I feel like you're advertising this Nyapi drug by what you're showing on Bluetooth. No, we are educating. That's the job of the public broadcaster, is to educate you about what is happening with our children out there. We should all come together and fight the scourge that is this Bluetooth drug. It is simply too horrific to get your head around what is happening out there. Now, let's go back to the theme that we were dealing with a little bit earlier, of course. The transition process at the African Union Commission has now begun this after major decisions, which include, among others, the readmitting of Morocco as a member earlier this week. Rabat joined the AU more than 3 decades after it withdrew from the bloc's predecessor over a row about the status of the Western Sahara. The North African Kingdom quit the AU's predecessor, the Organization of African Unity, after the body recognized Western Sahara, most of which has been controlled by Morocco since 1976. The Western Sahara has condemned the decision to readmit Rabat.
The longest conflict on the continent appears to have finally been resolved, but not without a lot of robust debate. All the Francophone and Arab countries supported Morocco, while most countries from the East and South, the Anglosons, were against the application. A heated debate between former liberation movements and governments. The AU recognizes Western Sahara as a member state, but Morocco does not recognize Western Sahara as an independent country. The AU Constitutive Act says no country that occupies another country should be allowed as a member, but the motion was passed with a majority of 39 countries against 10.
It is something indeed unusual, but I think as the organization, we have done every necessary thing to address that issue. and therefore, that's what it's going to be. There will be follow-up other kind of activities, but what became important was that it should be accepted. But I must say on that issue, there was quite a strong exchange of views. But at the same time, we were all putting above everything unity of the continent so that we are able to move forward.
Sarahawi says it will abide by the decision even though it's not happy with the outcome.
We as Sahrawi Republic accept this approach and subscribe to this consensus, and we are fully ready to start the debate with our neighbors, the Moroccans, to look for a solution to our long-standing conflict.
It's quite clear that the matter has divided the African Union. The question now is, what is going to happen with Morocco now that it's a member of the AU? Meanwhile, the AU is preparing for a new offensive to recapture areas that are still under the control of Somalia militia group Al-Shabaab. Somalia is currently preparing to hold presidential elections. Boko Haram is also under the spotlight.
We are training the Somali National Forces with other partners to really prepare them to take over, starting from October 2018, as you know.
The AU says it remains concerned about acts of extremism on the continent, including countries such as Mali, Somalia, and South Sudan, amongst others. The situation is also compounded by poor resources in dealing with the matter. Lehana Tsotetsi, SABC News, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Now, African expert and political commentator Isaac Homo joins us to talk about the Moroccan Western Sahara African Union development. Very good morning to you.
Morning to you.
Isaac, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, I think the first question, of course, would be, was it correct to allow Morocco back in? And do we see this massive split within the AU emerging now?
Well, in fact, I mean to say that it casts a lot of doubt on the sincerity of the African Union, if I'm talking about the member countries. Because what the Constitutive Act says, it's in black and white, that member countries are supposed to recognize borders, as per colonial borders, and they should refrain from using force. But what Morocco has done and what it has gone directly against the Constitutive Act, but then you find that African countries have come and overlooked that and they voted the man in. And I have a point of correction. Morocco was not expelled from the AU. Morocco was never a member of the AU. The AU and the OAU are two different animals.
That's correct. The predecessor of the AU. But let's quickly talk about the AU on this matter, because we've always known that there's a standoff between Francophone and Anglophone countries within Africa, more so than even the AU itself. This rift, do you see it becoming a problem within the AU going forward, especially when we talk about this kind of sovereignty?
In fact, that's a very important question, because the rift is there, but the rift was not there. If you look at the AOU, when Morocco was, when Western Sahara was recognized, I mean, it was the same Francophone countries that voted to recognize the Western Sahara. And it's the same ones which allowed Western Sahara to get into the AU. But then you find that with the situation, the geopolitics of African countries, I mean, France, under the Franc-Afrique relationship, they've got a bigger and a tighter hold on the African countries in the last, say, 10 years. To a point that with the downturn of the world economy, the African countries have been almost totally dependent upon France for a lot of their things. And also you find that in West Africa, where there's a very big threat of terrorism, the French are playing a very important part to prop up to fight terrorism. And that doesn't come cheap or doesn't come free. The end result that the African countries have given up their sovereignty, and to say that what we are seeing now, it is actually France forcing this country to recognize Morocco. It should be understood that in the Security Council, France is the only country that vetoes any motion which is supposed to take or which is geared to take Morocco to task over their occupation of Western Sahara.
Now, we always talk about anti-colonialism and we have to stand together to fight against colonialism, but what is happening with France's influence, surely that is still very much colonialism. We're looking at, what, $400 billion per year that comes into the French coffers out of Africa. Is that accurate?
Well, you see, that's what is called neocolonialism. I mean to say that the late President Nkrumah wrote a very good book, his last book. He said that neocolonialism, the highest stage of imperialism, or capitalism. And that is true. When he wrote it, people laughed, but he was absolutely right. What we are seeing is neocolonialism. When you talk of the French economy, I mean the French, ex-French colonies, they're not really independent. People like Gbagbo tried to break away from that stranglehold of actually where the economy is actually controlled by France, the central banks are controlled by France, and also who they do business with is controlled by France. What they get paid for their oil is controlled by France. If somebody wants something other than that, like what happened in CAR, they organized, in fact, rebellions. So basically, we are still living in a situation of neocolonialism, and that is the reality. We are seeing it now for the first time.
Yeah, so it's very scary indeed. What's left for the Sahrawi people now?
Well, the Sahrawi people will continue because basically the EU is behind them. I'm talking about the EU courts. They've actually had a case where Morocco was told of European countries were told that they're not supposed to actually do any business in Western Sahara. Same with the UN Security Council. But now we find that the problem is at the AU. What will happen there next? But Western Sahara case is a well-known case. There are AU, there are UN resolutions, Security Council resolution to the fact that a referendum has got to be held. Morocco has agreed to that referendum, but now they've retracted. They're saying they don't agree with the referendum. They can only issue out autonomy, to Western Sahara. But I think that is a bit too late. Yeah. So basically, the battle is going to be fought at the UN level, Security Council. The AU has been compromised.
Yeah, and the French will have a spanner ready to put it in the works at the UN, I'm sure. But
oh yes, they veto.
Let's quickly talk about Algeria and South Africa. They've always been unanimous in their support for the Sahrawi Republic. What's the way forward for countries like South Africa and Algeria in this space?
Well, the way forward, they've got to lobby. I mean, when you talk of where's the way forward, we're talking about, I suppose, we're talking about the arena of the AU. Now there they've got to lobby, they've got to actually have their arguments about why Western Sahara should be recognized as a state, and also the implementation of resolutions which are there. Yeah, the AU has got resolutions which recognize Western Sahara, and again they've got to actually assist Western Sahara sort of diplomatically, and not only that, diplomatic channels. Yeah, especially in places like the AU, like the UN, where you find that in the UN, maybe the AU can go there and actually sort of throw the towel in and says, okay, Morocco can do whatever it is. But people like South Africa and Algeria, they've got a bigger task on their shoulders. Yeah, and another thing, you find that Nigeria has capitulated to the French, and they've capitulated because they've got a very big problem with Boko Haram. And there's no country which actually came to really seriously help them. You remember that the president...
Barack Obama.
The Nigerian president, he tried to go to see Barack Obama to try to get assistance. Yeah. But was given a cold shoulder.
Yes.
And he was driven to the French, and the French are actually assisting the Nigerians to fight Boko Haram. But there you find that they've actually got to loosen their stance on many things that Morocco wants, that France wants to do.
Now, Isaac, in conclusion, the AU, let's just wrap it up with the AU. This is a massive setback for what the AU is trying to do and for the image of the AU really on the African continent. What is the way forward? How should the AU deal with this? I know they're in a bit of a spot.
Well, the AU have got to get their act in order. In fact, I'm sorry to say, but I don't want to talk about it, but under the leadership of Nkosana Zuma, I mean to say that's where the AU lost the initiative. Yeah, we lost the initiative to a point that that void has been filled with French, political or whatever. So I think we've got to get it back, and to get it back, we've got to start at the grassroots, basically. I mean to say we've got to lobby the individual countries, and that's the big job.
It's a big job also. There's a big Francophone influence within the AU also. It'd be tough to overcome that. Thanks for coming in.
Okay, thanks for having me, mate.
Always great to have African expert. Yes, that's Isaac Homer right there on your screen. Political commentator and expert on all African countries. The only man I've ever met that knows everything that goes on in every African country. Incredible. Going to take a short commercial break. We'll be back right after this.
A presumed U.S. drone strike in the south of the country has killed 3 al-Qaeda suspects.
Death toll in Yemen's 18-month-old civil war now stands at about 10,000.
People get killed or die and are actually buried before they're recorded, and we don't have a way of recording that, but we know the numbers are much higher.
Water restrictions are to be imposed on villages in and around the Nkomazi municipality.
Pumps can't pump the water because there's no water in a river. And if the water is coming back, then it's full of mud.
Those who can pray and those who can do any miracle to make sure that we've got enough rain, give it a try.
So people with prosthesis can live normal life.
Prosthesis actually manufactures the artificial limbs.
I can pick up stuff.
My friends think it's awesome. I like my life.
I can walk normally. There's nothing that I can do. It changed my life from the beginning to where I am now.
Dystrophic dysplasia is a type of dwarfism that affected all my major limbs.
Join Health Talk every Saturday for all your health news.
Well, let's shift our focus now to Zimbabwe. A Human Rights Watch report has found that women in Zimbabwe are evicted and dispossessed by their in-laws when their husbands pass away. This is a custom that has gone unchecked and unpunished. Now, millions of widows in sub-Saharan Africa are left destitute after being disinherited and robbed of their property. In the following package, Human Rights Watch spoke to various widows who are victims of this custom.
Wakakura nokuti munhu takatorerwa mapisi wakagobora varume vedu vachangouya kubva kwatanga tiri mumabasa gore noti ndoda kuti ndiise futi chi ndoda kutora munhu ndipewa mwana ndokuda shirika dzengadzi dziendi.
Around the world, millions of older women and older people generally routinely experience violations of their human rights. Each year, thousands of widows across Zimbabwe have their property grabbed by their husbands' relatives. They lose their homes, they lose their fields, they lose everything.
They take all the goods we're using with my husband, even cars, properties. They left me with nothing. Marriage certificate, inogona protect pane dzimwe nguva.
A widow would need to prove that she was married in order to be able to fend off relatives' property grabbing in courts. Estimates are that up to 70% of marriages in Zimbabwe are unregistered customary law unions.
Imagine the process that a woman who doesn't have a marriage certificate has to go through. She has to go to the court, convince the court that she was married, and sometimes even if she might have 5-6 children, relatives turn around and say she wasn't married.
An African marriage has always been understood as a communal marriage. It used to work when it was being understood that if the husband dies, what the other family members are doing in coming in is to take responsibility. However, that has now been changed because of greed, because of the general changes that have happened in society.
Handifunga kuti kana naiwe waimbozviitawo dai varume vedu vari vapenyu havasambosvika pakudaro apa kwakutongoshungurudza kwokuti ende kuti varume vedu vakaita sei wakafa.
If a widow overcomes that initial hurdle of getting herself to court, she still will face the struggle to be able to pay for transportation and court fees.
The court fees also, they are a challenge. And I know authorities will say, but perhaps for some cases it's just $5 or it's $1. But for the groups that we're talking about, the groups that we interact with, the rural population, and even some of those who are in the urban areas, they are not able to raise the $1 or the $5 that we're talking about. So I think it's one area again that then hinders access to justice.
We have to advocate that this has to stop. And I think much more work should be done to do outreach work, advocacy, so that the people are conscious about it, they're educated about it. If my wife becomes a widow, I want her to miss my presence only, and not any other thing. She must have all the property with her, and I am taking care that the property is not grabbed away from her. The registration of the house and the car is under her name.
Widows in Zimbabwe need to have access to information about their rights to property. They need to know about ways that they can defend their property through the court system if someone tries to grab it from them. And the government needs to make registration available for marriages of all types.
Pakurarama kwakadai kungoti kana uri munhu wokutongwa iwe usisina wako waunaye ipapo unongoteedzera mitemo iri kutaurwa ipapo.
It's a practice that is also seen elsewhere in Southern Africa, including here in South Africa, I'm told. Now, to talk to us about this report, senior researcher for Zimbabwe and Southern Africa with the Africa Division at Human Rights Watch, Dewa Mavinga. Very good morning to you, Dewa. Thanks for being with us.
Morning. Thank you for having me on the show.
Just talk to us about this report about violations of property and inheritance rights of widows in Zimbabwe specifically.
Well, the violation of widows' rights is widespread in Zimbabwe, primarily because of a misconception about customary laws. And over 70% of marriages in Zimbabwe are not registered. And this is where relatives of the husbands, when husbands die, take advantage and grab the property and assume that in terms of customary law, that property belongs to them. And these widows, when it happens, the widows will be in mourning. It happens when the husband dies immediately after, and they would not have, the necessary support to seek legal recourse to assert their rights. It's also a challenge that it's a silent problem in Zimbabwe. It's widespread and yet not talked about much. So when we went in, the widows that we spoke to spoke of how they had never assumed or thought that this could happen to them. So there was not enough preparation. So when people get married are together, they don't think about the moment of death. And yet when that happens, the relatives then swoop in and take everything. And yet the Constitution of Zimbabwe, the 2013 Constitution, provides that there should be equality, there should be gender equality, and that men and women have equal rights to property. And yet in practice, it's not happening. And
has the 2013 in the new Constitution, has it not been implemented?
Well, that's the big challenge. There are huge gaps in terms of implementation. So, for example, there is no provision that all types of marriages should be registered. And yet over 70% of the marriages are unregistered customary law unions. And in these unions now, the traditional laws are assumed to prevail. So although the Constitution provides for equality, there is no implementation. And because of that gap, we find that widows are losing out and they are unable to assert their rights because of the gaps in the law that exist.
So it's a rather sad state of affairs. What are the recommendations that the report is putting forward?
Human Rights Watch has asked the government of Zimbabwe to provide for the implementation of the 2013 Constitution in full so that there is practical gender equality between men and women. We've also asking for a reform in the marriage laws so that all types of marriages are registered and there is equal protection in law of men and women.
Yeah. Now, when you conducted this research, and did you speak to the government about this issue, and what was the response if you did?
Yes, we spoke to the government and we had a very positive response from the Ministry of Gender, Women Affairs and Community Development. They have come on board. When we launched the report in Harare, they were receptive. They accepted the report and our recommendations and committed to implementing it. But the challenge has always been in the action, because sometimes they speak positively, but there is nothing on the ground to show that they are committed and they are not putting resources towards the empowerment of women, particularly the vulnerable groups of widows and older women in Zimbabwe.
Do we see this elsewhere in Southern Africa?
Yes, and it's quite widespread. So you would find that across Southern Africa, there are many traditions that where marriages are not registered. They're just whether it's the payment of lobola or bride price, and then that's it. So when death happens to the husband, then you would find that the practice of property grabbing is quite widespread, and the widows do not have access to the court system, perhaps because of the cost or because of the gaps in the laws.
I wanted to just shift the focus quickly. I saw that the value-added tax has been increased in Zimbabwe, which will, of course, will have quite an effect on the poor and the people who are living right on the breadline in Zimbabwe. What's been the reaction to this increase in VAT?
Well, it's a catastrophe, because what's now happening is that people have their backs against the wall. 15% VAT is unmanageable, and you would know that across the globe, even in the US, the revolution was sparked by an increase in taxes. So this could really be a recipe for disaster. It's a red flag that the people could then rise against this government, because it is a government that has run out of ideas, and now the only source of revenue is to tax the people. and the people have now their backs against the wall.
What was the reasoning given for this increase?
Basically, it's fundraising. It's getting revenue by the government that is unable to, boost, exports. There is no development. There is no economic growth. So their only source of revenue now is the poor citizens who have to pay taxes, all kinds of taxes.
Well, Deva, thank you for joining us. That's a senior researcher for Zimbabwe and Southern Africa, Deva Mavhinga with Human Rights Watch. Of course, we're talking about developments in Zimbabwe, but also elsewhere here in Southern Africa. That's where we leave that report and the interview. Let's go over to Kendall Machamate now, who's going to give us a sports update.
Oh, thank you very much, Yeben. Good morning to you. This is what we've got for you in the sports today. We start off with the big tournament of the weekend, and that's AFCON, where Cameroon scored 2 goals in the last 18 minutes of their semi-final clash against Ghana to march into the final of the 2017 Africa Cup of Nations in Gabon. In a repeat of the 2008 final, on Sunday evening, the indomitable Lions of Cameroon will face off against Egypt, who beat Burkina Faso in a penalty shootout on Wednesday.
We're going to have the national anthems now here at the Stade de Franceville.
Ghana and Cameroon came into the semi-final match evenly matched in terms of continental championships. Both sides have 4 Africa Cup of Nations titles. After a rather pragmatic approach in the quarter-final against Senegal, Cameroon only had to wait 8 minutes for their first chance.
It's Teke! Cleared off the line! Adolphe Teke!
Their captain Benjamin Mukanjo was spearheading the attack in the early stages of the match. The indomitable Lions were camping in Ghana's penalty area, with striker Robert Dintembe posing a threat to Prima Razak's goal.
Deep Tembe!
Ghana, however, absorbed the pressure and started to launch their own attacks. Jordan Ayew should have done better after receiving a through ball from Christian Atsu. The Black Stars of Ghana took the game to Cameroon in the second half, but the Avram Grant-led side enjoyed similar woes in front of goal. Ghana won a set piece outside Cameroon's penalty area, and Fabrice Ondoa made an acrobatic save from Mubarak Wakaso's free kick. At the other end, Cameroon won their own set piece, and defender Ngandeu Nganjo scored after a terrible defensive mix-up.
Still in play, chances! It's there! Onside! Cameroon! Go ahead! The Black Stars didn't clear their lines.
Ghana pushed bodies forward in search of an equalizer towards the end, but it was Cameroon who scored a second on the counter-attack.
Christian Bassagog, can he seal it for the indomitable Lions? A dagger in the hearts of the Black Stars and their fans.
I'm more than unhappy. We wanted so much to be in the final. We did everything to be in the final. We dominate the game. Second half completely we dominate the game, and then first attack, even not attack, set pieces of Cameroon, and they scored. So it's very annoying because to lose this game, it's sad for us. I congratulate Cameroon, of course. They did all the efforts, and they are in the final. I wish them luck. But I'm not happy because this game, we was the better side and we lost. This is football.
From the beginning, they really showed motivation to do well in the SAFCON. We never talked about the final. We always talked about the next match. I think it's a great way of thinking to only talk about the next game, to keep going to the end with a huge willingness to fight. That is what we've always done.
Cameroon will be hoping to claim a first continental title since 2002. Mduduzi Ndlovu, SABC News.
Now staying with soccer news, the 2017 edition of the Nedbank Cup marks the competition's 10th anniversary. Big Premier Soccer League teams have avoided each other in the first round. Kaizer Chiefs, who were eliminated in the first round last year by Orlando Pirates, will now play Stellenbosch United FC away from home. A team that Chiefs captain Spiro Chabalala says they cannot take for granted.
An opportunity has presented itself this year for us to bring silverware, and we've been drawn against Stellenbosch FC, and we don't know much about them, but we'll give them the respect and we'll be professional about it. There's no such thing as an easy fixture or a small team. I think we can all attest to that based on what happened in the previous years.
Have a look, see at exactly what the full fixture list looks like. We'll start off with the first page that I've got for you. We've got pretty much the only PSL matchup. That's a KZN derby between Arrows and Maritzburg United. Then we've got Polokwane City against African All Stars. Supersport United, the defending champions, will be up against the Royal Eagles. Jomo Cosmos against United Rovers, and Kaizer Chiefs, as I've just said, against Stellenbosch FC. Aikenbush against Cape Town City FC. Ajax Cape Town up against Kwaduguza United. And Mbombela United, they play Days FC. We've still got a few more fixtures to look at. Another round of 32, 16 players, 16 teams that we've got. We've got Platinum Stars against AmaZulu, EC Bus against the runners-up from last year, Orlando Pirates, Mariveni United against the defending champions from the PSL, Mamelodi Sundowns FC, Cape Town, Baroka FC, Highlands Park against Free State Stars, Cape Town All Stars. They'll be playing Bidvest Vets and Witbank, Spurs against Chipa United, and Buyamsu against Bloemfontein. Now looking at rugby, where the South African Sevens rugby team is set to lose 2 of its star players to the 50-man game. This at the conclusion of this weekend's Sydney Sevens, the 4th leg of the World Rugby Sevens Series. As you know, Siabela Sinatla and now also Kwagga Smith are off to the Stormers and Lions, respectively. Despite this, the players who will have to fill their boots say the process will be seamless, thanks to the structures and systems in place within the team.
Players like Siviwe Swaiswapi, who has 3 tournaments with the Blitzboks under his belt, are not feeling the pressure of replacing the likes of Sinatla, World Rugby's Sevens Player of the Year. The 24-year-old says that the buy-in to the system the team employs means the pressure is not as intense as long as the players do their jobs. Swaiswapi and Roscoe Speckman have had cameo roles, but very effective ones at that.
The team is very good, and the team is doing very well. For me just to come off the bench and just do my part, and I must just go back to the basics, and if my basics is good enough and the team is doing good, so I don't have to do something special, because our game plan is so simple and it's a nice game plan. It's in and out the box game plan, and if you just come on the field and you just do what you want to do and just stick to the basics, and at the end of the day you will see the team is doing very good.
And indeed, Swaiswapi and Speckman have scored vital tries, illustrating that the Blitzboks are not built around just the big-name players. Speckman normally replaces Branko Duprier during the second half of matches and did not disappoint in Wellington last weekend, scoring a try in the final seconds after coming onto the field. The Sydney Sevens will be an opportunity to further extend the Blitzboks lead at the top of the standings.
We put everything in the past behind us, like last week we put it behind us. It's a new challenge for us, and we will make sure we start from scratch this weekend, and hopefully we can just take game by game, minute by minute, and at the end of the day we will be happy, because as long as our processes are good and the team is doing good, and the result will look after themselves.
Meanwhile, Sandile Ngobo, who travelled with the team as the official reserve player, had to return to South Africa due to a family bereavement. He is replaced by Stefan Dippenaar, who already travelled from South Africa to join the squad.
Time for tennis now. The Davis Cup Round 1 Euro-Africa group tie between South Africa and Estonia began at 10 o'clock today in Centurion with the first rubber, a difficult match for Nicolas Scholz. Scholz takes on the Estonian top-ranked singles player Jürgen Zopp, who's ranked 200 places above him. But team captain Marcus Andruska is confident that the team is going to do well.
I think our boys are looking better than ever. They're exactly at the place that I was hoping they would be. And I think tomorrow's going to be even better than what we see out there on the practice courts today. I think it's going to be a tough tie. I saw the other guys play very well too. I mean, the number one player, Pop, has been as high as 70 in the world. And having said that, I'm very confident in our boys.
There you have it. That's where we leave it with the sports. I will be back in the next hour with more sports, more reports. Be sure to stick around. For now, we do have the weather with Phil Hawkins.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, let's take a look at that weather. Southern Africa looking a little bit wet for today. Low pressure systems are drawing in a lot of moisture to the area. You can see showers, thunder showers all the way through the central regions of Southern Africa. They're extending into the eastern interior of Central Africa for today. We're seeing that tomorrow again, although a slightly smaller area affected by the low pressure systems, and also migrating a little bit further south towards southern Malawi and Zambia, also getting those showers and thunder showers once again for tomorrow. In terms of your weather watches, morning severe thunderstorms, that's a weather watch issued by the South African Weather Service. And we also have a weather warning, and that, of course, is for conditions highly conducive to the spread of veld fire. So please do be aware of both of these conditions. Very, very dangerous indeed. Now, in terms of your temperatures, well, Uppington's going to be hot there, 35 degrees Celsius. It's going to be a clear day in Cape Town with a 30-degree maximum, and showers forecast for most of the rest of South Africa. Now, Southern Africa does expect a warm day. Windhoek's at 28 degrees, temperatures in Harare at 27, and of course, Antananarivo continuing with those warm temperatures, 27 degrees, and always wet there in Madagascar. So some rainfall forecast for Antananarivo. Now, taking a look a little bit further north, Lilongwe peaks at 25 degrees, Dar es Salaam 33. The rainfall not quite getting as far north as we would like it there. Juba, Kampala getting a little bit of rainfall there. Juba, though, dry, 37 degrees Celsius. And we're going to see that rainfall receding a little bit further south again tomorrow. In all likelihood, that stronger rainfall not going to be present in that area. The southern coastline of West Africa, well, we're expecting some isolated showers here. Might just get some rainfall coming in off the oceans there. But other than that, it's going to remain dry all the way through that western coastline of West Africa, through, of course, the central regions of North Africa and the northern coastline there. Well, we're seeing some low pressure systems because it is winter, but the high pressure systems, which are both very present on that northern coastline, just mitigating those effects. And of course, as a result, we're not going to see much rainfall there at all for today or for tomorrow. We're going to see that condition intensifying with that high pressure band in the area. But we are going to see low pressure along that southern coastline again of West Africa. And of course, again, that's going to result in just a little bit of rainfall. In terms of the temperatures, well, it's going to be another cold one in Baghdad, 3 degrees. But take a look at what's going on the northern coastlines of Africa. Not very cold at all, 21 degrees in Tripoli. Now, this is the result of that higher pressure system. It's going to result in slightly warmer conditions for these areas. Tunis 19, Algiers 19, Rabat 18. And while these are not particularly hot, it is rather warm for this time of year, midwinter. Conakry's at 35 degrees, warm temperatures continuing in Lagos at about 32 degrees Celsius. Now, this is where we're going to leave your weather for now. Don't hesitate to call us. Questions, queries, or feedback, whether at sabc.co.za is our email, or call us 011 714 5077 is the number. That's it from me for now. Have yourself a great day.
Police found powerful military explosives when they swooped on a house in Springs on the Gauteng.
Some of the weapons seized at this house included rocket-propelled grenades, rifles, and even rounds of ammunition.
All military explosives that we found that we cannot obtain a commission.
The weapons found at the house not only had the potential to cause major damage to property, but they also put many lives at risk.
I could have lost any one of my family members, or most of my family members.
Keeping you up to date with business developments.
There's no shortage of money in the system. There's a shortage of implementation capacity to actually get things done.
Always on point with news of the day.
May has promised radical social and economic reforms, fueling speculation over the future of current senior figures.
On the ball every time with all sports codes.
The Joburg side already have a quarter-final at home, and a victory against the Argentines will ensure home semi-final.
accurate weather updates after every bulletin. Stay tuned to News Today at 3 p.m. from Monday to Friday on SABC News.
Yes, it's 1100 hours Central Africa time. It's the final hour here on the Newsroom. Jumbo Africa. I'm Elvis Preslin.
I'm Kendall Mahamad.
And this morning we're focusing on the new Nyaope drug, the drug craze called Bluetooth, which is fast gaining popularity in some townships. Now, how it works, Kendall, is that one Nyaope addict will get high, will take his blood and then give to the others around.
Wow.
That's absolutely crazy, isn't it?
Truly scary.
So, question we're asking you, is Nyaope getting out of control in our communities? Here's what you have to say about that.
Unati Grootboom comes in and says, I hate what I see now because I nearly lost my younger brother to the streets.
There you have it. Marumo says, is already out of control and worse than before.
I am Amudi Malong. Fighting the drug dealers is not a fight for the faint-hearted. You need tough decision-making people at the helm of government.
Mlungisi Zondo says, this Nyaope problem seems to be getting worse. I hope it doesn't do to South Africa what crack cocaine did to the US. Well, it's going to get there if we continue the way we do. These are some of your comments coming through. But Kendall, we're also running a poll. It's a poll really that affects everybody. If you're looking for a job, we're asking you that question. Should your looks count during a job interview?
Now, we've got some interesting comments that we're going to look at. But first up, let's see what the poll says. There have been 171 votes in so far. 25% say sometimes it should count. 46% say no, they shouldn't count. And 29% say yes, absolutely.
No, that 29% is probably the beautiful ones, the pretty ones they call them, eh?
Yes, the ones that have got the job.
Yeah, so here Debbie McKenzie says, I'm a recruitment agent and no, looks don't count. Experience and qualifications do. So says Debbie, and she recruits people.
And Michael Mditra says, Newsroom, it does not count at all. Agreeing with Debbie.
This one from Monwabisi says, no. Where does looks include in a job in your CV should speak for itself, not your looks. The CV should speak and not your looks, he says.
Bantu says it's very unfair to focus on looks. What is the best look? According to whom is that look good? Character and experience count.
There you have it, Bantu. You hit that one right on the nail there.
But with all of that said, Elvis, so many people do actually bring up that they look at what happens in the front line of certain businesses. The people that work in certain service industries, they all look good.
Yeah,
how do they
and
get that?
Why should they look good?
Yes.
That's another question. Well, you can let us know. We'll read your comments as we continue during the course of the show. But right now, let's take a look at your news headlines. The Clausen Board of Inquiry says suspended National Police Commissioner Ria Piecha refusal to take responsibility led to her downfall. The Du Toitskloof Pass remains closed as firefighters continue to make efforts to extinguish an extensive vegetation fire that started at the top of the Du Toitskloof Pass outside Paarl overnight. And a Pretoria man has been arrested on a charge of assault and attempted murder after pepper spraying a group of men in another alleged racist attack in the capital. Those are all your headlines. Before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front.
Elvis, thank you very much and good morning to you. This is what we've got for you in the sports on this beautiful Friday morning.
Now Abubakar, only a full in his way. Christian Bassagog, can he seal it for the indomitable Lions?
A last-ditch attempt to get back into the game backfires for Ghana as they fall to a sucker punch counter by Cameroon to go down 2-0 in their AFCON semi-final clash last night.
we must take each and every game seriously, regardless of the opponent.
The 10th edition of the Nedbank Cup is upon us, and Kaizer Chiefs' Spur Chawalala says Chiefs will not take any side lightly.
Our boys are looking better than ever. They're exactly at the place that I was hoping they would be. And I think tomorrow's going to be even better than what we see out there on the practice courts today.
South Africa's Davis Cup captain Marcus Ondruska is confident that the team will do well against Estonia as they meet at the Irene Country Club for their tie this weekend. All this and more I've got for you later on in the Sports Bulletin. I'll also be bringing a chat that I had with Juliana Barrett, the lady who's suing SASCOC for R5.5 million. All that and more at 11:35.
Thank you, Kendall. Top story this hour. The Clausen Board of Inquiries recommended that suspended National Police Commissioner Ria Piecha be removed from office. Retired Judge Niels Clausen found that Piecha showed lack of understanding of the importance of her position. Parliament's police portfolio has declassified that report, and it's now...
Juliana Barrett, the lady who's suing SASCOC for R5.5 million. All that and more at 11:35.
Thank you, Kendall. Top story this hour. The Clausen Board of Inquiries recommended that suspended National Police Commissioner Ria Piecha be removed from office. Retired Judge Niels Clausen found that Piecha showed lack of understanding of the importance of her position. Parliament's police portfolio has declassified that report, and it's now does not taken an official position on settlement activity, departing from previous administrations that have considered the settlements illegitimate. Britain and Germany, who are close Israeli allies, as well as the European Union, have criticized Netanyahu's approval this week of more than 5,000 new settlement homes in the West Bank. Now, Naheem Jina is the executive director of the think tank Afro-Middle East Center, AMAC, and he now joins us here in studio. Very good morning to you, sir, and welcome.
Morning. Thank you.
First and foremostly, are we seeing a policy shift from the U.S. by almost reprimanding the Israelis in terms of the settlements?
Well, we're seeing a policy shift from previous governments. The Trump government has made it clear from during his campaign that they're going to be much friendlier towards Israel than previous American governments, even if it means violating international law. So the movement of the embassy, for example, is a violation of international law. And so they've been consistent to that. I think we shouldn't read too much into the statement about this may not be helpful.
Yeah?
As you said, you know, the statement from the White House has made it clear they haven't taken a position. So they're putting this out there in anticipation of the meeting with between Netanyahu and Trump in 2 weeks' time, where the matter will be discussed. So they haven't taken a position, number one, which is a problem because all previous U.S. administrations have taken a position, and it's an international law position. And secondly, their statement also says that they don't believe that settlements as such are an impediment to peace, but perhaps the extension or expansion of settlements may not be helpful. So they're really not criticizing in any way this new development.
It sounds very confusing because on the one hand they say it's not helpful to build these settlements, on the other hand they're moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem.
Well, that's why I'm saying that we shouldn't read too much into the may not be helpful statement. They certainly have made it clear that they are determined to move the embassy. We still wait to see whether it happens. But
what are the implications of that, moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to...
Well, firstly, it's a violation of international law because Jerusalem, under international law, is annexed, illegally annexed by Israel, and it can't be. And that's why no country in the world has its embassy in Jerusalem, Israeli embassy in Jerusalem. So it's a violation of international law in that way. But it could also mean that if the Trump administration wants to take it further, they start pressurizing some of their allies to do the same thing. It legitimizes then the annexation of Jerusalem and creates a kind of fact on the ground that will be difficult to undo later.
And what would that fact be, you think? Will there be more targets against the Israelis from the Palestinians?
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, I think that Palestinians at the moment are feeling quite battered but unsure about how to respond to the whole Trump situation and a new alliance between the U.S., a new kind of alliance between the U.S. and Israel. So I don't think that we're going to see any violent attacks soon from Palestinians. There is some talk that there might be a new Israeli onslaught on Gaza. Just judging from media reports over the past few days. possibly by the middle of this year. And so I think that you might see Palestinian retaliation to that, but I don't think that Palestinians are going to take an initiative like that.
One of the hardest questions always asked is whether or not Washington will be a neutral mediator in this particular impasse between Israel and Palestine. Your thoughts?
Elvis, my view is that anyone would be a fool to think that Washington previously, even under Obama, would have been a neutral mediator. The fact that Obama increased the aid to $38 billion to Israel is an indication of that. Now it's much worse than that. I mean, Trump has gone way beyond that. So definitely not a neutral mediator.
Looking at the settlements, in December the UN Security Council passed that resolution condemning the settlements. But if you look at that, is the UN then capable of implementing this and making sure that it does not happen? Because 5,000 settlements are being proposed.
5,000 settlement units.
Homes, yes,
yeah.
yes, sorry.
No, the UN is not. Well, I mean, the UN is capable if they want to make that decision, but they're not going to. The resolution in December is not new. We've got a number of resolutions, even from the Security Council as well as General Assembly, from 1967, condemning settlements. We've got the Geneva Conventions, which declares such settlements illegal. And these UN resolutions specifically referring to Israeli settlements. So the resolution is not new by in any way. There's been no action taken on any of the previous resolutions, and I don't think that there will be now. If the United Nations or if some members of the Security Council feel strongly that some action needs to be taken, it'll be vetoed by the United States.
Let's talk about Amona, the outpost erected in the West Bank without formal permission last week. This is not the first time that this has happened, actually. The police witnessed violent clashes 11 years ago when the police demolished 9 homes and found to be having built illegally on private Palestinian land. Why is this resurgence, especially in Amona, you think?
Well, first, Elvis, let me say that, of course, according to international law, every single settlement house is illegal. Yes. Even ones in these big blocks like Malia, Dumim, etc. They're all illegal under international law. I don't think that there's any kind of new resurgence here. Amona is one. There's others that happen all over the place where they built, of course, in violation of international law, but as far as the Israelis are concerned, in violation of Israeli law. They're not given permission, and they built and they're broken down. This is not a new thing. It happens on an ongoing basis in different places. I think that the one reason why the Amona thing has got such a high profile now is because they want to use it to counterbalance the fact that there's 6,000 new homes being planned. And so, I mean, all the shots you see, you don't see, even on our media, Elvis, I should say, no one has
Whiskey is spelt with an E, and sometimes without, he'd say.
Oh, to be sure. You fare so good, look. It's the whole thing. They're back and get off in the whiskey, without the E.
Yeah, didn't catch that. But if you asked us the difference, we'd tell you that every whiskey from around the world is spelled without the E, except for Irish and American whiskies. Get a bottle of Johnny Walker Black Label for only $2.99.99 from Tops at Spar.
Ford
cougar thing is becoming a hot potato for them, excuse the pun.
US carmaker Ford has finally admitted that a fault is causing some of its Ford Cougar SUVs to catch fire, and
it also formally issued a recall in South Africa.
Ford needs to take accountability.
We'll work with our dealers and try to come up with a way that satisfies them.
Discrimination has always been an ugly thing, and an ugly word, some say, something to avoid, and even worse when it is based on a factor that you simply can't help, such as your sex, your age, sexual preferences, or in this case, your looks. Studies suggest that employers look at a job candidate's physical appearance as a part of their eligibility criteria. Now, recruitment expert Yoni Titi says that interviewers unconsciously acknowledge a candidate's physical appearance before even listening to them, before they sell their skills. Titi is the managing director of Yoni Titi Human Capital. It's a 100% black-owned recruitment agency focusing on middle, senior, and executive placements. She's also the USA Qualified Leadership Coach. She holds an MBA from Edinburgh University, a BCom in law, postgrad in corporate law, and advanced banking, as well as leadership coaching graduate at Georgetown University in the USA. She has 10 years experience in the recruitment business. She now joins us in studio to talk to us about that. A very good morning to you, Yoni, and welcome.
Morning, Elvis, and thanks for having me.
Now, that's a very long CV. Some people would say, geez, is that what you do? How long have you been doing it now, you say?
I've been in recruitment for 10 years, and before that, I was in corporate South Africa for probably another 8 years or so.
8 years,
so
yes.
yeah.
Now, Yoni, we run a very interesting poll this morning because we wanted to find out from South Africans, what do they think? Do their looks really count when they go for interview? Let's put up that poll and see what we've got there so we can show you where we stand right now and see if the guys can. If you can just put up that poll for us, there we go. We asked the question, should your looks count during an interview? And this is what people are saying. 29% says, and I'm sure that's the pretty ones, they are saying yes, looks should count. 46% are saying no. And 25% of them are saying sometimes. 171 votes in, and I can tell you it's a high number of votes there for people. What do you make of that?
I think that people are answering to the question of should. And perhaps what I'm here to talk about is the reality, which is the unspoken
What is the reality?
Truth. The unspoken truth is that when candidates, as well as entrepreneurs themselves pitching for work, what happens is that the first impression that you give is more on a physical level. So when the potential employers look at a candidate, they've invited you to the interview, they've seen your CV, but the impression is going to be based on the way that you are groomed, the way that you've put yourself together, the way that your physical attributes, the way you carry yourself, your charm, your social liveness. And that's what we actually call the package.
So the package. But how serious is that issue of the package? Is it very serious? Does that determine the outcome?
It has a lot of influence on the outcome. You can have individuals carrying the same skills set and the same level of experience, and you'll generally find that the person who will ultimately get the role is the one that offered that package. It's the one that had what we also call the erotic capital, which is the physical attributes. They carry themselves in a different manner. They just come across differently. And the comparison now really becomes on those attributes because we've already got the skills and the experience.
That erotic capital, do some of your clients ask you to look for that specifically to recruit clients or candidates?
Generally, clients come to us with the expectation that we understand their industry, what the expectations are, what the culture of the organization is, and what the ideal fit in a candidate is. So it's almost like an unspoken specification in certain instances. If I make an example, if I'm recruiting for a health insurance company and that health insurance company is looking for a head of marketing, it does not need to be deliberately stated that we're looking for a certain kind of fit, but that person needs to be the brand ambassador of that client. So the physical attributes will again play a part in that particular consideration. But if I'm looking for somebody that's not client-facing or does not is going to be in a call center, what I'd be looking for there is more their social liveness telephonically, which is the vocal. So we're talking about verbal, vocal, and visual.
So there's a lot to take into account when you recruit in that respect. So let's take a look at the marketing, what did you call it, director, executive?
Head of marketing for a health insurance company.
So that person cannot be overweight, obese, or whatever, because it'll send the wrong message, wouldn't it?
For the industry that they're going into, for what the company does, it would send the wrong message. So the client will likely wish to make an appointment that is going to be in line with what their brand is and what they stand for, which is positive health.
Which job categories are most affected by this type of erotic capital that you need to distinguish?
I probably would have to say that it's more your white collar kind of roles. It's more your corporate space. If I'm looking for somebody who's going to be not client-facing, like I said, if you're a mechanic, you can have 20 tattoos. Nobody really is going to care. But if you're going to be in a client-facing corporate environment, that erotic capital comes in. And I've given the description of what the attributes would be that really give us what we're looking for, which is the package.
Would you say, though, that this is unfair discrimination to a certain extent?
It certainly is unfair discrimination. It's not even a conscious bias that interviewers and decision makers have. They will look at somebody, and people generally want to recruit and work with people that they like. And when they look at somebody, there's certain things that trigger that positive response of a connection. Of course, the unfairness of it is that if you have certain of these biases, which you mentioned earlier, it can either be your sexual orientation, your physical orientation, even the way you articulate yourself, it could be facial scars, etc. Those are the kind of things that they would have a bias, which is unfair. The question is now, from a legal perspective, how would you go about that? Because the feedback is not necessarily given to you that, Elvis, you didn't get this job because you didn't quite have that package we were looking for. So it's also hard to prove.
Yes. Now, I said earlier, you know, when I joined my local club there and I wanted to enter the ugly competition, they sent me away because they said, you know, I'm a professional, so I can't fit that. But if you look at that, if you had to give advice to a potential candidate right now today, what would that be? That doesn't look too good, by the way.
When it comes to presenting yourself for an interview, really, the CV is a foot in the door. It lends you the invitation to attend the interview. The next step for you is to try and put yourself together in the best manner that you can. So your dress sense will be very, very important. And there's lots that you can read up, or you can even find a coach that can be able to get you into the right kind of thinking around dress sense. It's also going to be the way that you present yourself, the way that you speak in that interview. It's about your charm, your eye connection. It's about being socially intelligent during that interview as well. It's also about somebody having a presence. And some of these things you can build up over time. People who are more shy tend to have a more difficulty, but others that are not, you know, would probably do much, much better than others. So the advice would be, try and be that package. Don't only rely on the fact that I've got the experience and I've got the CV. We are moving away from just only expecting qualifications. We are looking for that package.
Yoni, thank you so much for your time and joining us here in studio.
Thank you.
That was Yoni Titi. She is the Managing Director at Yoni Titi Human Capital, giving you a little bit of advice in terms of how you should go about your next interview. Pay attention to this one. Now, it is against the law to discriminate against anyone in the workplace because of their physical appearance, for example, height, weight, body shape, disfigurement, skin conditions, scar, or birthmark. Employees are protected from discrimination at all stages of employment, including recruitment, workplace terms and conditions, as well as dismissals. For more on how they are protected, we are now joined by Grant Wilkinson, who is a labor lawyer from Global Business Solutions. Grant, a very good morning to you and welcome.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Now, you heard about erotic capital in my previous interview, but tell us about what is discrimination.
Well, discrimination is where you treat someone differently or potentially prejudice them based on a variety of factors. Now, discrimination is dealt with predominantly in the Employment Equity Act, and there we're looking at a list of factors ranging from age, race, gender, and most recently with the Employment Equity Amendment Acts that came through in 2014, they added something called any other arbitrary ground, which, judging from your earlier discussion, that would fit into any other arbitrary ground, which is something that you can't really justify the rationality and justifiability of the action.
Now, what does the labour law then say about discrimination in the workplace based on looks and body size and even sexual orientation?
Well, I think the discrimination based on sexual orientation inevitably falls squarely under Section 6 of the Employment Equity Act, and that's one of what's called the listed grounds. Appearance, etc., might very well find itself under this new to use the term loosely, the 3-year-old principle of any other arbitrary ground. And it's unfair to discriminate against someone based on those grounds. The only justification for it, and to make it a fair discrimination, and there's two justifications. First up is any affirmative action, which inevitably weight won't count. We're talking about race, gender, disability representation there. And the second one is inherent job requirements. The amendments have brought in stuff like justifiability, rationality, but those two principles are a good fallback to fall under rationality and justifiability. So you're going to have to prove that the appearances of the person are an inherent job requirement. No doubt I agree with your previous guest in that the looks of a person, how you present yourself for an interview, are critical. But in terms of appearances, you don't have to be a supermodel unless you are going to be walking the ramp.
Let's take a look at one of the examples we used earlier, and that is the medical executive. Now, I mentioned the fact that if that person is overweight and obese, that person will not fit the criteria, and of course there is grounds for discrimination in that case. Would you agree with that?
Well, you'd have to test if it's an inherent job requirement. I think if you're going to be selling a particular product, a particular lifestyle, I think there could be a strong argument for suggesting that, having someone who's not matching the profile of what they're selling could potentially be argued to be an inherent job requirement.
Mm-hmm. What are legal and ethical implications of this thing called lookism as well as look phobia?
All right, you want to expand on that for me? Lookism, look phobia. Sorry, I've heard of erotic as well this morning, which was interesting. So.
In terms of what people look like and how they come across and how they present themselves, that package that my previous guest was talking about.
I think inevitably, no doubt, in the interview process, the interviewer is looking for competence, and competence is knowledge, skills, and best fit. And best fits where that subjectivity could play a role. Knowledge and skills are objectively measurable. Best fit is something that sometimes you can't really pinpoint. You know when you see a person that's going to suit the role in question. I think what we have to be very careful of is that we don't get caught up in you want everyone to run an Ironman. I'm an attorney, and at the end of the day, to do my job doesn't mean I have to run an Ironman. It doesn't make me a better attorney. Obviously, work-life balance is important, and lifestyle is important for your own personal health. But in terms of a workplace, I don't really see an Ironman making me a better attorney, as an example.
Mm-hmm. Now, how should a person address discrimination in the workplace if they come up against this, and what options can one explore if they're facing discrimination?
I think inevitably, if you're facing discrimination, let's start with an employee who's experiencing it in his own workplace where he's already employed. I think there it's a question of talking to your human resource department or potentially with a direct person who might not know, because often discrimination is indirect and unintentional. I find people are acutely aware of the possibility of discrimination cases nowadays. So it's those subtle issues that do crop up. Direct discrimination is easy to prove, but I think address it with the individual, or if you don't feel comfortable, talk to your human resources department. Perhaps then, if it has to be formalized or going through a process, go through your own grievance procedure. Each company has a grievance procedure, which will follow the steps of how to manage an internal grievance. If that fails, inevitably, depending on certain factors, cases can be heard at the CCMA or alternatively in the labour court, bearing in mind certain considerations on jurisdiction.
Grant, I thank you so much for your time and joining us and giving us the legal perspective.
Thank you very much.
That was Grant Wilkinson, who is a labor lawyer from Global Business Solutions. Now, of course, you know, we're asking you that question on our poll in terms of your looks, and should your looks count when you do an interview and during your job interview? Let's take a look at what you have to say. Christian Kleinan says, should looks, race, gender, age, unrelated disabilities, etc., count in unrelated job interviews when you have clear ability? Well, I should have asked that question to our legal expert there. Marumo says no, never. Never, ever should that ever be a thing in your interview. Debbie McKenzie says, I'm a recruitment agent, and no, looks don't count. Experience and qualifications do. Debbie, well, you heard our previous guest talk about erotic capital. And what do you say to that? You should have the package together when you go for your interview. That one from Michael says, no, it does not count at all. These are some of your comments coming through. You can keep them coming, and we'll read them as we continue. But we'll take a break right now, and we'll be back right after that.
Health Talk unpacks healthy tips to help you to practice healthy living lifestyles.
Now, generally, type 1 is found mostly in children and young adults, and with type 2 diabetes is found mainly in the older generation, and also with an issue of obesity.
Don't have second portions, and then I brought this plate model to show that for both meals, your lunch, your dinner, half a plate should be vegetables.
Within sports, we see the spectrum itself. Most often we see minor head contact injuries, we call them.
Right.
But certainly in sports, the one that a lot of attention is paid to is concussion.
You see, you've got something, boom, but it's uncontrolled. Whereas in soccer, when the guy hits the ball, it's controlled. His neck muscles are controlling it. And that's why they say, for instance, in rugby, the training should be to improve your neck strength.
For more on health, join your host Dr. Selo Motaung every Saturday from 9 to 10 a.m.
Shifting our focus now, last year was a devastating year for rhino and elephant poaching as the numbers skyrocketed. Even our very own State Security Minister, David Mashlobo, was linked to an alleged rhino horn smuggler. Now, as we enter into February, the official statistics from last year have still not been released. Award-winning 50/50 presenter and filmmaker Bonnet de Bot joined us in studio to talk to us more about this.
I think, as we know, many have not been fond of 2016, and that's putting it lightly. But certainly, I think it was a terrible year for rhinos. And I'm not talking stats here, figures. Government hasn't released the 2016 figures yet, but Elvis, I don't need to know whether we are going to be 10% down or 10% up. I know we will probably hover around the 1,000 mark again, making it 6,000 rhinos poached since 2010. You know, still one every 8 hours in our country. You know, and I have to tell you, in my 3 years of investigating this world of greed, I've never seen so many alleged poachers standing in the dock as I did in 2016. You know, these crooks are really flooding into our national provincial parks, and there's no stopping them. We had a crippling drought in 2016, where many have told me that the losses have been massive. And it's important to note that, like rhino orphans, these drought rhinos do not make the official stats. Private rhino owners have told me that bureaucratic sluggishness has crept to an all-time high. And farmers are saying that permit information is being sold to poachers looking for an easy target. And then we know that corruption has infiltrated throughout the system. I mean, how could we forget the headline at the end of 2016, State Security Minister's alleged link to rhino horn trafficker? which has yet to be resolved.
Yeah. Now, that particular case, how far is it right now? Because, as you said, it's still not resolved.
Right. Let's just recap. Now, back in November, the international news channel Al Jazeera broadcast a documentary posing serious allegations, links between our State Security Minister, David Mashlobo, and a self-confessed Chinese criminal and Rhino horn trafficker operating out of a spa in Nelspruit. Now, of course, the South African media jumped all over the story, and the minister has now threatened to not only sue Al Jazeera, but also other publications for defamation. But, you know, there's been a lot of sort of questions asked whether there has been an inquiry into these claims. Now, the UK Daily Mail reported that Minister Radebe said that Cabinet had noted the allegations and that the police were investigating. But just last week, various newspapers reported that the Hawks had at no stage opened an investigation into these claims, but had been conducting an inquiry into the activities of the spa as a brothel.
And the Chinese national has fled the country as well.
Exactly. So I think that was actually, I think, the really big news was when the Hawks announced that this Chinese criminal has now disappeared, which is rather disappointing. You know, so the Hawks are blaming Al Jazeera for messing up their investigation. But I just have to say, Elvis, you know, looking at the response on social media and the scrutiny of the local press, I think this has the ability to really damage the reputation of our security cluster. So I think it's vital that this needs to be sorted out thoroughly and quickly so that the state security can carry on with their very important work of busting up these criminal syndicates.
Looking at the numbers, as you called it, 6,000 Rhino, you know, it's a huge number. What do we expect for 2017? You did say there is an increase in the arrest of these syndicates, but will that actually help?
Now, good question, Elvis, because the official stats for 2016 have not been released yet. We are still waiting for that. Now, I've been in communication with the department and they have not yet set a date. Now, there's a lot of speculation as to why there is this delay. And I think we have to look at the bigger picture. There's a dark cloud hanging over our State Security Minister at the moment. Although we must remember, these are all just allegations. Nothing has been proven. But remember, Minister Molewa doesn't hold the press briefings on her own. She's accompanied by other ministers, Minister of Justice, Police, and of course State Security. Everyone involved, directly involved with the fight against poaching. Now, there is an indication of numbers. I know Minister Molewa has had the stats for quite some time now. Kruger released their stats, and I believe the numbers are down from 2015, but of course I will have to wait for the official confirmation. KwaZulu-Natal released their stats, and they sadly lost 161 rhinos in 2016, a massive increase from 116 in 2015.
Time for sports. The time has just hit 20 to 12. My name is Kendall Makhamati on this Friday morning. Now, a Cameroon side devoid of all of its stars scored 2 goals in the last 18 minutes of their semi-final clash against Ghana. This to march into the final of the 2017 Africa Cup of Nations in Gabon. In a repeat of the 2008 final on Sunday evening, the indomitable Lions of Cameroon will face the Pharaohs of Egypt, who beat Burkina Faso in a penalty shootout on Wednesday.
The national anthems now here at the Stade de Franceville.
Ghana and Cameroon came into the semi-final match evenly matched in terms of continental championships. Both sides have 4 Africa Cup of Nations titles. After a rather pragmatic approach in the quarter-final against Senegal, Cameroon only had to wait 8 minutes for their first chance.
It's Teke! Cleared off the line! Adolphe Teke!
Their captain Benjamin Mukanjo was spearheading the attack in the early stages of the match. The indomitable Lions were camping in Ghana's penalty area, with striker Robert Dintembe posing a threat to Prima Razak's goal. Ghana, however, absorbed the pressure and started to launch their own attacks. Jordan Ayew should have done better after receiving a through ball from Christian Atsu. The Black Stars of Ghana took the game to Cameroon in the second half, but the Avram Grant-led side enjoyed similar woes in front of goal. Ghana won a set piece outside Cameroon's penalty area, and Fabrice Ondoa made an acrobatic save from Mubarak Wakaso's free kick. At the other end, Cameroon won their own set piece, and defender Ngandeu Nganjo scored after a terrible defensive mix-up.
Still in play, chances! It's there! Onside! Cameroon! Go ahead! The Black Stars didn't clear their lines.
Ghana pushed bodies forward in search of an equalizer towards the end, but it was Cameroon who scored a second on the counter-attack.
Christian Bassagog, can he seal it for the indomitable Lions? A dagger in the hearts of the Black Stars and their fans.
I'm more than unhappy. We wanted so much to be in the final. We did everything to be in the final. We dominate the game. Second half completely we dominate the game, and then first attack, even not attack, set pieces of Cameroon, and they scored. So it's very annoying because to lose this game, it's sad for us. I congratulate Cameroon, of course. They did all the efforts, and they are in the final. I wish them luck. But I'm not happy because this game, we was the better side and we lost. This is football.
From the beginning, they really showed motivation to do well in the SAFCON. We never talked about the final. We always talked about the next match. I think it's a great way of thinking to only talk about the next game, to keep going to the end with a huge willingness to fight. That is what we've always done.
Cameroon will be hoping to claim a first continental title since 2002. Mduduzi Ndlovu, SABC News.
Now the Proteas have the chance to wrap up the 5-match ODI series against Sri Lanka tomorrow at the Wanderers when the third game gets underway. They will, however, be without the informed David Miller, whose century in Durban contributed to inflicting a second successive defeat on the tourists. Miller, who scored an unbeaten 117 from just 98 deliveries, picked up an injury to a finger on his right hand while fielding. Miller will miss the remainder of the series. It did require stitches to the laceration, which will need at least 7 to 10 days to heal, and it could not be considered for the last 3 matches. Miller, we understand, will not be replaced.
Special for the crowd.
Now, in closing today, South African fencer Juliana Barrett is suing the South African Sports Confederation and Olympic Committee for just over R5.5 million for culpable and wrongful failure to enter her into the 2016 Rio Olympic Games. Barrett, an épée fencer who achieved provisional qualification through continental qualification, did not make it to Rio. Now, from our understanding, it's because of an agreement set up between SASCOC and the Fencing Federation of South Africa, which calls for qualification to be through an international event. I spoke to her yesterday via Skype from New York, where she currently lives. I started by asking her why she was suing SASCOC and the SA Fencing Federation.
The basis of it, I met all the Olympic qualifications under the Olympic Charter, and at the very simple level of it, SASCOC failed to register me for Rio. And as an athlete, I'm sure a lot of other athletes can relate. When something doesn't happen the way you've been told it should happen, and in my case, I've been dreaming about the Olympics forever. In this case, it's not that I lost a match and I had to get over it and pick myself up and move on or find out what I did wrong. In this case, I did everything right. I qualified and my dreams came true in that regard, and there was nothing I could do within that remedy. So for me, if something wrong happens, I'm the kind of person who has to be proactive about it and do something to fix it. And this seemed the only way.
You know what, I reached out to Tabi Reddy, the CEO of SASCOC, this morning before making this call, and he did say exactly that they've also gone through due process. What do you make of that? I mean, they've gone through due process, and through the due process, their understanding is that you should not have been part of Team South Africa going to Rio, whereas you feel that you've gone through all the processes and you should have been part of the team going through to Rio. Where does it fall?
I don't want to speculate on their end, but for me, if they were to register, if they were not going to register me in the first place, and they knew that right after my Olympic qualification in April, then I should have gotten notification that I would not be going to Rio immediately after. Instead, I found out officially I was not going to Rio the day after they missed the deadline to respond to the International Fencing Federation's letter, which was asking them why hadn't they responded to my registration, or whether they were going to register me. So for me, I'm looking at it at a very simple level under what I believe their responsibilities to be.
Juliana, tell us, what do you hope to get out of this process that you've instigated now?
A few things at the very simple level. I know what's been going around seems like a very big number. Again, as I'm sure a lot of athletes can relate, we put in so much to our sports, and we work so hard and give up so much. And for me, not being able to go to Rio and become a full Olympian and be recognized as such has really limited me, especially future opportunities.
Right.
I gave up a lot in school and in the curriculum I chose to study, so I could travel, and not taking an honors thesis so I could fly to a World Cup in China that I wouldn't have been able to, etc. That sort of, those sort of sacrifices.
Yes.
And the timing of it all, being a student, I had that flexibility, but now that I'm working, I don't have the flexibility as an athlete, and I'd be giving up a lot more, much more. And so a lot of that comes from lost sponsorships and that sort of thing that I would have had in the future as well.
Right, that was Juliana Barrett speaking to me via Skype from New York, where she lives. She is suing SASCOC for R5.5 million. And SASCOC have said that they've got nothing more to add to the story. They will see in court, where I believe that justice will be served, and we'll get to the bottom of the story through that court process. And that's where we're going to leave it for now. I'll be back next week with the entire team on Monday morning, 9 a.m. sharp till midday, bringing you more stories from the world of sports. You're watching Newsroom. Kinna Kendall Makamat. This is Alex.
Came up with this really cool concept that we both absolutely loved, and it was tennis inspired, sports lux if you will, but still really edgy, and of course still staying true to who she is as a designer, which I felt was very important.
Failed to register me for Rio, and as an athlete, I'm sure a lot of other athletes can relate. When something doesn't happen the way you've been told it should happen, and in my case, I've been dreaming about the Olympics forever. In this case, it's not that I lost a match and I had to get over it and pick myself up and move on or find out what I did wrong. In this case, I did everything right. I qualified, and my dreams came true in that regard, and there was nothing I could do within that remedy. So for me, if something wrong happens, I'm the kind of person who has to be proactive about it and do something to fix it. And this seemed the only way.
You know what? I reached out to Tabi Reddy, the CEO of SASCOC, this morning before making this call, and he did say exactly that they've also gone through due process. What do you make of that? I mean, they've gone through due process, and through the due process, their understanding is that you should not have been part of Team South Africa going to Rio, whereas you feel that you've gone through all the processes and you should have been part of the team going through to Rio. Where does it fall?
I don't want to speculate on their end, but for me, if they were to register if they were not going to register me in the first place, and they knew that right after my Olympic qualification in April, then I should have gotten notification that I would not be going to Rio immediately after. Instead, I found out officially I was not going to Rio the day after they missed the deadline to respond to the International Fencing Federation's letter, which was asking them why hadn't they responded to my registration, or whether they were going to register me. So for me, I'm looking at it at a very simple level under what I believe their responsibilities to be.
Juliana, tell us, what do you hope to get out of this process that you've instigated now?
A few things at the very simple level. I know what's been going around seems like a very big number. Again, as I'm sure a lot of athletes can relate, we put in so much to our sports, and we work so hard and give up so much. And for me, not being able to go to Rio and become a full Olympian and be recognized as such has really limited me, especially future opportunities.
Right.
I gave up a lot in school and in the curriculum I chose to study so I could travel, and not taking an honors thesis so I could fly to a World Cup in China that I wouldn't have been able to, etc. That sort of, those sort of sacrifices.
Yes.
And the timing of it all, being a student, I had that flexibility, but now that I'm working, I don't have the flexibility as an athlete, and I'd be giving up a lot more, much more. And so a lot of that comes from lost sponsorships and that sort of thing that I would have had in the future as well.
Right, that was Juliana Barrett speaking to me via Skype from New York, where she lives. She is suing SASCOC for R5.5 million. And SASCOC have said that they've got nothing more to add to the story. They will see in court, where I believe that justice will be served, and we'll get to the bottom of the story through that court process. And that's where we're going to leave it for now. I'll be back next week with the entire team on Monday morning, 9 a.m. sharp till midday, bringing you more stories from the world of sports. You're watching Newsroom. Gina Kendall Makamat. This
came up with this really cool concept that we both absolutely loved, and it was tennis inspired, sports like, if you will, but still really edgy, and of course still staying true to who she